I have a young black dog, and I need to take her outside many times a day because she's still learning to go to the bathroom outside. I usually walk her on the quiet streets near my house, which can get very dark. Walking there makes me feel uneasy. I go during the day and I've never run into anyone strange. While walking, I kept noticing an old, damaged blue car driving by. Something about this car made me feel weird. The first time the car drove past us, I didn't think much of it. But as we got close to the street near my house, the car showed up again, grabbing our attention. "Did you see that car before?" I asked my cousin. "Yeah, I thought the same thing," she said. As we reached the corner, I pulled my dog close to stop her from running in front of the car. I didn't want to cross the street, so we decided to wait. But the car stayed there. This made me more worried. I tried to see who was inside the car, but I couldn't. All I saw was a dark shape of someone driving. But the scariest part was feeling like the person was looking right back at me. We chose to walk away, and the person in the car kept watching us. After we crossed the street, the driver suddenly sped up and turned sharply. My cousin was really scared and suggested we go a different way home, but that would make our walk longer, and we were close to my house. We watched the car drive away, but we froze when we saw its brake lights turn on. We ran to my house as fast as we could. I had to hurry my dog along. Once inside, I looked out the window to check for the car. It was gone, and I felt relieved that the person didn't know where we lived. It was a scary moment, but thankfully, we were safe at home. Later, when I moved, I didn't walk my dog anymore and asked my boyfriend to do it instead. I live in a small flat in a tiny area not far from a huge city. This place has 8 homes, but only 5 have people living in them. The rest are empty. This area is small, and as time passed, many people left, making it feel empty and quiet. But if I try to move closer to the city, the rent is too much for me, so I have to stay here. It's not the worst place to live, but it's not that great either. So, a few months back, after I came back from my job, I did my usual evening stuff and went to sleep. That night, I kept waking up because of noises from the flat above mine. I heard soft banging sounds, thumps, and now and then it sounded like someone was walking around. I had no idea who lived above me, and I had never heard these noises before. I went to my job the next day tired from not sleeping well, wondering all day about the noises. What was going on up there? When I returned home that day, I listened carefully to see if there were more noises, but until I went to sleep, there was silence. No walking, no sounds, nothing. It was strange and made me feel uneasy. The silence was too heavy, and the mystery of the night before hung in the air. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but a part of me couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The next night, as I tried to fall asleep, I couldn't help but strain my ears for any sound from above, hoping and dreading at the same time that the silence would break. It was around the middle of the night when I woke up again, but this time, the sound was different from what I remembered from the night before. As I tried to shake off my sleepiness, I realized the noise was louder, and it wasn't coming from the flat above. It was closer. I got out of bed and quietly moved to the living room, where my flat's door is. The noise was coming from the hallway outside. I peeked through the little hole in the door, but I could only see the door across from mine. I couldn't see much of the hallway. Then I heard footsteps moving away, going up the stairs, and then the sound of a door slamming shut. I waited a moment, then opened my door a bit to look outside. The hallway was empty. Knowing someone was out there, making those noises so late, made me feel scared. I quickly locked my door again and waited around for a bit before trying to sleep again. But, not even an hour later, someone was knocking loudly on my door. Carefully, I went to check through the peephole again. There was a man outside, his hands hidden in his jacket. He knocked again, then tried to see if my door was unlocked. He seemed nervous, looking around the hallway. Then he seemed to talk to someone I couldn't see, as if he wasn't alone. That's when I realized this could be very serious. I quietly got my phone to call the police. While I was talking to them, the knocking got louder. Then suddenly it stopped, and I heard footsteps running upstairs into the flat above mine. The police came not long after. I told them everything, and they checked the upstairs flat. It was supposed to be empty, but they found two men hiding there with trash everywhere. The men said they were just looking for a place to stay and didn't mean any harm. They didn't explain the noises or why they came to my door so aggressively. They were taken away by the police, but I don't think they were punished much. They were homeless and hadn't actually hurt anyone. But that night, I was more scared than I've ever been. Even though they didn't say much, I feel like they were planning something bad, especially for me. I've been at my job in a small storage place for 4 years. It's much smaller than most. You wouldn't think it's a storage place just by looking at it from the outside. A tiny tech company owns it, and they only handle their own stuff, so they don't need a big space. My work buddy Tom and I are the main night shift guys. We take turns working through the night, but hardly ever together. Night shifts mean you're on your own. The main thing to do at night is paperwork, like counting what's in stock and checking off what's been sent out. It's really a one-person job, But this one night, while I was doing the paperwork in a small room at the back, I heard a knock. It came from the front of the place. I went to see, and there was this guy standing outside the main door. He was trying to peek inside, hands cupped around his eyes and face pressed against the glass. As I got closer, he saw me and stepped back, knocking again to make sure I saw him. He started yelling and grabbing the door, shaking it hard. I told him he had to go, that we weren't open for visitors. He looked at me through the glass for a bit, then turned and walked off. I thought maybe he was just drunk or something, but then the next night it happened again. The knocking started, and the same guy was back, yelling at me to open up. I warned him to stay away, and if he came back, I'd call the police right away. He seemed to take my warning seriously because he turned around and left fast. For the next few weeks, there was no sign of him. I talked about him with the day workers, but none of them had ever seen him. Then, one night, while I was driving the forklift, I thought I heard a noise from the back side of the place. It sounded like a thud, as if something hit the outside wall. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. So, I stopped the forklift and went to check. Everything seemed normal at first. Nothing was moved or fallen. As I walked closer to the end of the building, I saw the back door. I started to think, maybe that man came back and was trying this door now. That could have been the noise. This door had no glass, no way to see who was outside. I checked and it was locked, but I couldn't shake off a weird feeling. I thought about opening it to check outside, but decided against it. Going back to my work, I heard the noise again after a few minutes. I checked inside again. Everything was as it should be, but the feeling got stronger when I looked at the back door. Then I had an idea. I rushed to the main office, wanting to check the security camera that faced the back door. My boss always said not to bother with the cameras, but I felt I had to. Finding the right footage took a moment, but when I did, there he was, the same man, standing by the back door, ear pressed against it, like he was listening for something inside. I called the police, but it seemed he knew because he walked away as soon as I put the phone down. For the next 2 days, we looked through the last 2 weeks of footage. Even after I confronted him at the front, he kept coming back every night, always to the back door, always listening. It was chilling to realize he had been there every night, unnoticed. The police patrolled outside for a few weeks, but the man didn't return. I still don't know what he was after, but the thought of him coming back lingers in my mind. Last year, I was hanging out with some friends and something scary happened right after. It was close to midnight when I decided to head back home. We had been at my friend John's place, which was quite a walk from my house. It would take me around an hour to get home, but walking didn't bother me. The evening was nice, spent with good friends, but now I was walking alone on the not-so-bright streets of our usually quiet town. The air was chilly, and a light wind was blowing. I had walked this route many times, during the day and occasionally at night. Walking now, the sound of my own footsteps echoed off the empty streets, making me feel even more alone. The houses that were lively during the day were now dark and quiet, with everyone probably asleep. The streetlights were weak, barely lighting up the path in front of me. I walked fast, as I usually do. Being quite tall, my strides are long. When I got to the corner of Oak Lane and Maple Drive, I noticed the flash of car lights from behind. I turned around and saw a car speeding towards me, way too fast. Fear kicked in. I ran to the side, trying to avoid the car. I heard the loud sound of the car's brakes as I moved out of the way. The car almost hit me, and I could feel the air move as it passed by. I stood there frozen, watching the car. Then the brake lights turned on, bright red. The car stopped. Then suddenly, it turned around and started coming at me again. My heart was pounding and I started sweating from fear. I ran, looking for a place to hide. The only thing I found was a lamppost on the sidewalk. I hid behind the lamppost, hoping it would keep me safe from the car. The car stopped suddenly when it got close. I just stood there, frozen. I could see the shape of the driver, but nothing more. He stayed still and silent. I waited there, feeling more scared with each passing second. Then I took out my phone to call for help. Seeing this, the driver put the car in reverse and left quickly. That's when I realized the car didn't have a license plate. I tried to calm down, thinking about what had just happened. Someone had actually tried to hit me with their car for no reason. By the time the police got there, the car was long gone. I described it the best I could, but without a license plate, it was hard. The car looked ordinary, a quiet shade of dark silver. The police officer offered to drive me home since I was close, but I was too afraid to go by foot. Once home, I went straight in and locked the door behind me. Leaning against the door, I felt my heart finally start to slow down. I went to bed but couldn't really sleep, thinking about the night. The police never contacted me again, so I guess they didn't catch the driver. Not that it mattered much. I had no proof of what he tried to do, and without a camera around, there was no way to show that anything happened. I often drove long distances for my job, moving from one city to another. My employer would cover the cost of a nice hotel for me, but there were nights I'd just park somewhere quiet and sleep in my car instead. This way, I could save the hotel money for myself, basically making extra cash for the day. One evening, after finishing up work late, I found myself on a deserted road, far from any town or hotel. Deciding to call it a night, I pulled over, reclined my seat, and quickly dozed off. Sleeping in the car was never a problem for me. I found it rather comfortable. Suddenly, something woke me up. I sat up straight and glanced in the rearview mirror. There, some distance behind my car, stood two figures. Initially, I thought they might be good Samaritans or even cops, curious about a solitary car parked by the roadside at night. I exited my vehicle, intending to reassure them that all was well. However, before I could get near them, one of the figures fired a gun in my direction. Shocked and scared, I dropped to the ground. While I was down, I heard two more gunshots. I couldn't be sure they were shooting at me since I wasn't hit, but fear gripped me. I knew I had to escape, yet standing up seemed too dangerous. Peering from the ground, I noticed that the men hadn't moved any closer. They just stood there, not moving, and I realized they didn't have a car nearby. I crawled back into my car, turned it around, and sped off in the opposite direction, my heart racing with fear of hearing gunshots again. But no shots came. As I put some distance between us, I noticed a pickup truck parked on the side of the road. Thinking it might be theirs, I made a mental note of its license plate. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest gas station, where I parked and tried to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, and my thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and anger. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, recounting the night's terrifying events and providing the license plate of the truck I had seen. An officer arrived at the gas station to meet me. We talked for around 30 minutes, and he decided to stay with me through the night, just in case those men decided to come after me again. Thankfully, they never showed up. With daylight, I felt a bit safer, but knew I had to keep moving. I continued on my way, eager to leave that nightmare behind, the road ahead symbolizing a faint hope of leaving those dreadful memories in the dust. The following day, the police called me. They had located the pickup truck and arrested two men linked to it. Both had a history of criminal activities, including robbing unsuspecting travelers. They denied ever shooting at me, but I was almost certain they were the ones. Although they weren't charged for their attempt on me, knowing they were caught for other crimes provided some comfort. It wasn't the complete closure I hoped for, but it was enough to know they wouldn't be preying on anyone else anytime soon. I was working the late shift as a guard at a big office building in the middle of the city. This building was huge, standing tall among other buildings, touching the sky. Inside, it was like a small city with many companies spread across its floors. The hallways seemed to go on and on like endless tunnels. My job started at 10 at night and didn't end until 6 in the morning. Everything was quiet at night, with only the sound of the air cooling system and cars from far away breaking the silence. Being alone in such a big place always made me feel a bit lonely. But that night, something felt off. I was sitting at my desk looking at the cameras when I heard a weird noise coming from where the elevators were. It sounded like something scraping against metal, and maybe there was a quiet banging sound too. I wasn't sure. I couldn't stay put. I had to see what it was. I walked slowly through the dark hallway, my footsteps echoing on the hard floor. The quiet around me made my heart beat louder in my ears. When I got close to the elevators, I looked carefully around the corner, expecting to see something. But there was nothing. The elevators were just there, not moving, doors shut. I thought maybe I had just imagined the noise and went back to my desk, trying to shake off the feeling. But just as I started to relax, a person appeared behind me. He came from where the noise had been. It was a man wearing very old and loose clothes. He looked rough and his eyes were wild, which made me really scared. He walked up to me quietly from behind. It shocked me because all the doors were locked except the front one, and I didn't see him come in. I had only left my desk for a short time, and he came from the opposite direction. I had no idea how he got inside. The man asked me some weird questions like what time the building opened. Then he just turned and walked towards the exit. I quickly grabbed my phone to call the cops. I pressed the emergency number on my phone. The strange man seemed to notice because he quickly turned around and came back towards me, this time showing a gun. He ordered me to put the phone down. I listened and let my phone fall onto the desk. Without saying more, he took my phone and put it into his pocket, then started moving back to the front door. I sat frozen, shocked by what was happening. But inside, I hoped the emergency call had gone through, even though I hadn't spoken to anyone. I wished the call could be traced, not knowing if that was possible. I was too frightened to even think about reaching for the other phone right in front of me. But then, the sound of sirens came closer and closer, cutting through the quiet night. The man looked back at me, panic on his face as he heard them too. When the police arrived, they quickly took control. The man was angry, but couldn't do anything, as the police took him away. They moved quickly and knew exactly what to do. After he was taken by the police, I finally felt safe again. The immediate danger was gone, but the fear and questions about why he was here lingered. The police looked around, trying to figure out why the man had broken in. They found a back door with a broken lock. That's how he must have gotten inside. After that night, the building got safer. We got more cameras and more guards. Every weak spot in the building was fixed. Everyone felt a lot safer, but I couldn't forget that night. Last autumn, I decided to camp in the forest near my home. My house is in a countryside area close to some big mountains, and doing things like walking in the woods, camping, and fishing are a big part of what I like to do. I didn't have a detailed plan. I just thought to walk up a path that was about 4 miles long to a place where people can camp. I planned to stay there for 2 to 5 days, depending on how I was feeling. I started my trip early in the morning, before the sun even came up, and by the middle of the day, I had found a nice spot. I set up my tent and made myself feel at home. After that, I took my fishing tools and walked to a small lake not too far away, about a 1/4 mile. I believe I was the only one who ever came to this place. It's quite far from the popular spots in the mountains, and I only went there a lot because it was so close to where I live. It was easy for me to just grab my things and head out whenever I felt like it. In all the 10 years I've been going to this spot for camping, I never saw another person or even signs that people had been there. That's why I was so surprised when I heard someone shouting. I was standing by the lake, and the shout came from the forest on the other side from where I had set up my camp. For those who might not know, it's really hard to tell how far away a sound is in the mountains because of the echoes and the way trees and water can make sounds seem closer or farther away. The shout sounded like it was not too far from me, but I couldn't understand what was being yelled, so I thought maybe they were actually much farther away than it seemed. I first thought it might be a group of friends having fun. It was really strange to hear someone in such a remote place shouting or calling out like that. After fishing for about an hour and catching a good amount of fish, I went back to my tent. I started a small fire and began cooking as the sun set. When it became dark, I heard the voice again, but now it was louder and clearer. It seemed to come from the woods close to where I was camping. Because it was so dark, I couldn't see much. The voice sounded like it belonged to a young guy, and now it seemed like he was screaming in pain. He shouted again, asking if anyone was out there. He sounded so desperate, unlike anything I had ever heard before. I quickly stood up, thinking he might be someone who got lost and needed help to find his way back. I took my bag and a flashlight and started walking through the trees toward the voice, but the closer I got, the more careful I became. I turned down my flashlight to make less light and moved more quietly. Then I heard footsteps on the grass in front of me. The steps came closer and then stopped. Soon after, the voice called out once more. I tried to see into the dark, thinking the person must be just a few steps away from me. I turned on the light and pointed it forward. Right there, just a few feet away, was a man staring right at me, standing completely still. We were both silent for a few seconds before I finally spoke. "Do you need help? Are you lost?" I asked. But the man didn't move or say anything back. He just kept staring. I felt a cold shiver run through me and suddenly knew I had to get away. I felt danger all around me. I quickly went back to my camp, took down my tent, and packed everything up. I kept shining my light around to see if he was following me. I ran all the way home, twisting my ankle and falling a few times because I was shaking so much. The person I saw didn't seem like he needed help. It was more like he was trying to trick me into thinking he did. I still don't know what he wanted, but being alone in the woods at night made the whole thing even scarier. I've never gone back to that place, and I don't think I ever will. I've been working at a gas station for 3 years. During this time, I've met many weird people and faced a few scary situations. But mostly, I've been more fortunate than other workers in similar jobs. However, everything changed earlier this year. It was a normal night, and I was behind the counter, waiting for the hours to pass. The gas station was located in a small, quiet town, so not many people came by at night. I was staring out the window at the empty street when the phone rang. I didn't rush to answer it, but when I did, there was silence on the other end. No breathing, no background noise, nothing but silence. I found this silence oddly interesting, maybe because I had nothing else to do. But after waiting for about half a minute and getting no response, I hung up. I thought about calling back, but I figured if someone really wanted to reach the station, they'd call again. Soon I forgot about the call and went back to watching the street. Even though the gas station was in a suburb, the whole area would usually become completely dark by 1 a.m., with only the streetlights still on. Suddenly, the sound of the door opening startled me. I turned to see a man entering. He seemed to be around 40, dressed in a dark blue hoodie, with a look of weariness and dissatisfaction. He moved towards the liquor section and started to look around. He spent quite some time wandering through the aisles, seemingly unable to pick a drink. After watching him for a while, I lost interest. I checked on him briefly every now and then, just to make sure he was fine. Looking back outside, I noticed the absence of any vehicles. It dawned on me that he might have walked to the station. When I looked back to check on him, he was gone. I searched the aisles, thinking he might have suddenly felt sick or something, but he was not there. He had disappeared without a trace. I even went to check the bathroom, thinking he might be there. It was not locked, and when I looked inside, it was empty. Feeling a bit confused, I called out, "Sir?" hoping he might answer, but there was only silence. I walked back to my spot behind the counter, wondering if my mind was playing tricks on me. The door to the shop has a bell that rings whenever someone comes in or goes out. I didn't hear it ring after the man entered, which made me think. I took an energy drink from a shelf, hoping it would help me stay alert. Over the next hour, A few cars stopped for gas, but no one else came into the store. I tried to distract myself by watching a podcast on my phone. Then suddenly, I heard a noise in front of me. I looked up and nearly jumped out of my skin. The man was there again, walking past the counter and out of the store. He continued walking in front of the gas station until he disappeared from my view. I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of shock. When the owner arrived at 5 a.m., I immediately told him what had happened. He promised to look into it, but later messaged me to say nothing was missing, and he didn't check the security footage because it was a hassle and seemed unnecessary. What bothered me the most was that the man didn't buy anything. He just appeared, vanished for over an hour, and left without a trace or any explanation. A few days later, I saw my manager again and begged him to review the security tapes. He refused once more. Not long after that, I left the job and ended up working at another gas station on the opposite side of town. The identity and motives of that man are still a mystery, and honestly, I prefer it that way. My small house is at the end of a tiny village with lots of open space around it. It's not completely alone, but the next house is a good walk away, so it doesn't feel like a normal house in a village. I chose this place for that reason. I had been living there by myself for around 6 years when this strange thing happened. It was just a regular weekend, and I had no special plans. I was mostly watching TV or working in my small garden. One afternoon, as I was walking inside my house, I glanced out the window and saw something strange. There was a person walking between the trees, quite far away but still on my land. They could clearly see my house from where they were, but what was really strange was the way they were walking. They were heading toward the back of my house, which only leads to a big forested area. I kept watching them from the window as they walked past my backyard and disappeared into the woods. I wasn't too worried about someone being at the edge of my land, but it was definitely odd given where my house is. I continued my day, checking the window a few times to see if the person came back, but I didn't see anything else. Later that night, I was watching a movie in my living room. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. They were quiet and slow, someone walking on the leaves outside. I moved silently to look out the window and was shocked to see a man just a few steps away from me. After the shock wore off, I looked again. He seemed not to notice me. He just kept walking slowly, crossing my yard. It seemed to be the same person I had seen earlier, but I couldn't be sure. I watched him until he reached the other side of my land and walked into the trees again. It was one of the scariest things I've ever experienced, especially since he was so close to my house this time. I stayed awake longer than usual, ready to call the police if he came back. By 11 p.m., there was no sign of him, so I felt it was safe to sleep. I went to bed but woke up in the middle of the night to a sound I recognized. Footsteps outside my house. I quickly got dressed and ran downstairs, but the footsteps stopped. I checked every window but saw no one. Then I went to the front door and peeked through the peephole. The same man was standing in my driveway, staring at my house. It was a chilling sight, as if he was planning something. I grabbed my phone to call the police, knowing they would take a while to arrive. When I looked outside again, the man had disappeared. Then I heard footsteps on the side of my house. I waited, hoping he would leave, but then there was a loud, sudden noise from my backyard, followed by complete silence. I was frozen, standing still when another loud bang echoed and silence fell again. It felt like an eternity before the police showed up. When they did, I could hear them outside, shouting for the man to put down his weapon. This lasted for a few minutes until the police finally got the man to give up. The reason for his actions was unclear, and when I told the police about him walking through the woods earlier, it just made things more confusing. The man claimed he was temporarily insane. Whether that's true, I can't say, but it's hard to believe. Last month, something scary happened to me while I was still living in my old apartment. This apartment was part of a building with 3 other homes, and mine was the last one. I work on my computer from home. One day, around lunchtime, while I was taking a short break, someone rang my doorbell. I went to see who it was and saw a young woman standing there. She was quite thin, wearing torn jeans and a simple shirt. I waited for her to tell me why she came, but she didn't say anything right away. So I asked her what she wanted. She looked a bit confused and asked me if I lived there alone. It sounded strange, as if she didn't expect me to be there. I told her yes, it's just me here. She said sorry, thinking she got the wrong place. I told her it's okay and closed the door behind me. After that, I went back to my desk to continue working and didn't really think about the visit much more. Hours later, after finishing my work, I went to the store to buy some food and got back home around 8 at night. Walking into my apartment, something felt strange. I couldn't tell what it was, but I just went on to store my groceries and started to make dinner. While cooking, I heard a noise coming from one of the bedrooms along the hallway. All the doors were shut, and I couldn't figure out what made the sound. I tried to tell myself it was probably just noises from the neighbor living above me. I finished cooking and sat down to eat at my small table. Then I heard a door open. It took me a moment to realize the sound came from inside my apartment, not from a neighbor's place. I got up and stood still, listening to footsteps in the hallway, getting closer to the kitchen. Suddenly a man walked out from the hallway into the kitchen. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me at all. He just walked straight past me to the front door, opened it, and went out. I was frozen next to the table, full of fear. I hurried to lock the front door and then locked myself in the bathroom. Even though I knew the man had left, I was still terrified he might return. He never did come back, but the police couldn't find any clues about who he was. I explained everything to them, but since he didn't look at me, I couldn't describe him well. We even asked the people living nearby if they saw or heard anything strange, but no one noticed anything. The scariest part is that there were no signs someone forced their way in. It seemed like he had a key or something to open the door. I also mentioned the strange visit from the woman earlier to the police. It felt like maybe they were working together, checking out my place before he came in. I can't figure out why this happened to me. Only a few things were missing. Not worth much money. Perhaps I came back home before he could take more. He didn't even carry a bag for stolen items, and thinking they might have had a key made me even more scared. I managed to move to a different place, but it's only been a month, and I'm still feeling the shock. I guess I'll always wonder about that day, never really knowing what happened. I've been thinking a lot about sharing my story of a time I was alone at home and felt really scared. It might not sound super scary to others, but for me, it was the first time I ever felt truly uncomfortable and not safe in my own place. This happened a few summers ago when I was in my early 20s. I was studying for my degree online and was working on an assignment one day when someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened the door and saw a man who said he was there to check the apartment for any damage. I live on the highest floor of my building, and the only way out is through the front door. I didn't feel stuck until something scary happened later. I did have some issues with my apartment because of heavy rain a while ago. It had damaged my walls and even caused a light in my ceiling to stop working. I told all this to the man, but he said he needed to come in and see for himself, so I let him in. I should mention I wasn't really dressed to meet someone. I had on a red nightgown, and I didn't realize it was on backward. Looking back, I think this might have led to what happened next. I took the man to my room to show him the damage, and I even let him take pictures. He had a strong accent that made it hard to understand him at times. While he was looking around, I called my mom to tell her about the unexpected visit. I was lying on my bed while talking to my mom, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the man was staring at me in a weird way. I didn't think much of it at the time because I was focused on my call. After I hung up, I showed him the rest of the apartment to check for more damage, which didn't take long. As I was showing him out, he made a comment about my body, asked how old I was, and then took out his phone. He wanted to take a picture with me, which made me feel really uncomfortable. I tried to cover myself with my arms, but he moved them away and even pulled down my nightgown a bit to take more photos. I was really scared, but tried to act normal and told him he needed to leave. As I was trying to get him out, he asked for a kiss. I said no, but then he asked for a hug. I didn't know what to do, so I hugged him, and that's when he tried to kiss me. I managed to move away just in time, so he only touched the side of my mouth. I quickly said goodbye and locked the door. Then I called a friend and told her everything. After the call with my friend, I felt a wave of anger and fear wash over me. This man had almost attacked me in my own home. I had faced unwanted touches on crowded trains and unwanted comments on the streets because of how I dressed before. Those times, I could just walk away from those scary people. But this was different. This happened in my home, where there's only one way out. That scared me even more. I called my mom next to tell her what had happened. She was really angry. She asked if the building manager was there when this happened. I told her no. It turned out that the man wasn't allowed to be in my apartment without the building manager. I felt sick to my stomach. So I ended the call with my mom because someone was knocking on my door again. The man had returned, and this time the building manager was with him. I had put on a hoodie by then and just let them in without making a fuss. The man acted as if he didn't know me, and I was too upset and shocked to say anything. After they left, I talked to my mom again. She said we needed to keep the story straight because when she and my dad got back, we were going to the police station to report what happened. And that's what we did. The police told me to write everything down and talk to the building manager. My mom spoke to the building manager before going to work the next day and told him everything. But the manager acted as if I was making it all up, saying that women often claim they were attacked when they're alone with a man and not dressed properly. So, nothing was done about it. The man was just quietly moved to work in another building to prevent more problems like this. My family still lives in that apartment. It took me a long time to overcome the fear and anxiety that experience caused me and to feel okay around my male friends and comfortable with myself again. Now, I ignore the building manager whenever he comes around. He has to tell my parents whenever someone is coming to inspect our apartment, because I refuse to be home alone for those visits. When I was 20, I came back home for the summer break from college. My good friend, let's call her Anna, and her boyfriend had just found new jobs. They had a house all to themselves, sitting at the top of a very steep hill. A bit about Anna. She gets really nervous and anxious all the time. I get anxious too, but I've gotten a bit used to living by myself and dealing with my worries. But Anna, she wasn't used to it at all. Their house had a back door in the kitchen. If you were sitting on the sofa in the living room, you could see straight into the kitchen. Right outside the kitchen door, about as high as your shoulder, there was a light that turned on when it sensed movement. It's important to mention that Anna's backyard was pretty high up. To get into the yard from the little walkway in front of the door, you had to go up a few steps. The yard was made this way, so it wrapped around to the front of the house. So this motion-sensing light would only turn on if something moved on the walkway, not for any animals in the yard. The yard itself was tiny, with thick woods stretching down from the end of it. One night, Anna was by herself because her boyfriend was working his first or second night shift, and she couldn't fall asleep. They were trying to save money, so all the lights were off. Then she saw a light come through the kitchen window. It was the motion-sensing light. This really scared her, but she tried to just ignore it. However, the light kept turning on and off at different times. She called me over and over around 3 in the morning until I finally picked up. I talked to her on the phone, trying to calm her down until her boyfriend came back in the morning. He had the next 3 days off, and nothing happened with the light during that time. Her dad warned her to be careful, suggesting it might have been thieves checking out the house, especially since there had been some break-ins recently on a street close to hers. So, the next time her boyfriend had to work at night, Anna asked if I could stay over. I said yes. The evening started off pretty normal. We watched movies until about 11. Then we decided to drive out to the nearest vape shop and grab some food from McDonald's. Where we live, it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, so getting there and back took us almost an hour and a half. We got home around midnight and set up the air mattress in the living room where we planned to sleep. Around 1 in the morning, that motion-sensing light outside turned on again while we were sitting on the mattress. I tried to calm her down by saying it was probably just an animal, maybe a bat or something flying by. Anna wasn't so sure. The light went off, but then it came on again, this time staying on longer. Anna decided to go upstairs and get her boyfriend's gun. We sat there, really nervous, with the window open so we could hear outside. Anna joked around, shouting, "I've got a gun, and I'm not afraid to use it." She was trying to make me laugh, but right after she said that, the light turned off. It stayed off for about 3 hours, as if we had scared someone or something away. Neither of us could sleep after that. Around 4 in the morning, I went to the kitchen to get some water. When I turned around to say something to Anna, she suddenly screamed for me to come back. I spun around, and the light was on again. We saw the light turn on and off several times until the dawn began to break. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. We thought about calling the police, but were worried they might think we were making a prank call and we'd get in trouble. The light never seems to act up when her boyfriend is home at night. I still feel really uneasy being alone at her place during the night. I'm sure someone was up to no good that night, whether they planned to break in and found it amusing to scare us once they realized the house wasn't empty, or if they had even worse plans. Either way, it was a terrifying experience. I live in a small village in the countryside of Oregon. It's a quiet place, mostly known for its farms and friendly neighbors. Nothing much happens here, especially anything scary or dangerous. My home is a cozy house where I stay with my mom and my younger brother Alex, who's 16. I'm Mike, and I was 13 when all of this scary stuff happened about a year ago. My mom and Alex had to drive to a city a few hours away to pick up some relatives from the airport. They decided to spend the night in a hotel because driving back in the dark wasn't something they were comfortable with. Even though I was just 13, I'm pretty tall and strong for my age, standing at 5'11" inches and weighing around 170 pounds, which is not common for boys my age in our village. Now let me get into what happened that night. I was in my room playing a video game called Brawlhalla, and suddenly, I felt hungry. I decided to head downstairs to the kitchen to grab some food. Our house is designed in such a way that as you walk down the stairs, you can see the living room, the kitchen, and the windows that face the backyard. As I was walking down, I started hearing a scratching sound. We have 4 cats, and they often make such noises, so I didn't pay much attention to it at first. However, as I passed by the window near our front door, I noticed something odd through the blinds. Considering it was around 10 or 11 at night, the sight of someone outside the window was startling. I felt uneasy about checking it out, so I quickly locked the door and rushed back to my room. My bedroom has a large window, and the roof outside is not too high, about 15 feet up, with a generator placed right beneath it. It's pretty easy to climb up there. I've done it a couple of times. After returning to my room and starting to eat while watching TV, I heard a tapping sound. I muted the TV, trying to figure out where the noise was coming from. It seemed to be coming from my window. Cautiously, I approached and peeked outside. At first glance, I saw nothing, but then I spotted someone lurking close to my window on the roof. I recoiled instantly. The person was wearing a black hoodie, making it impossible to see their face. I quickly grabbed my phone and texted my mom, telling her someone was on our roof, tapping at my window. She replied urgently, telling me to make sure all the doors and windows were locked and to call 911 if anything else happened. The night grew deeper, and I tried to settle down for sleep, playing some music to calm my nerves. But just as I was about to drift off, I heard the front door opening. Confusion washed over me since my mom and Alex weren't due back yet. I turned off my music and listened intently, hearing footsteps moving around downstairs. Scared and unsure, I quickly closed and locked my bedroom door. For some reason, I didn't think to call the police right away. Instead, I tried to call my mom, but she didn't pick up. I hesitated to call the police because I thought maybe my mom and Alex had come back unexpectedly. But then things took a terrifying turn. I heard a man's voice inside the house. He was speaking Spanish, a language no one in my family knows. My heart raced as fear took over. I rushed to hide in my closet, barely breathing, trying to make no sound. The footsteps grew louder, moving around the house, coming up the stairs, checking each room, and then finally entering mine. As the stranger moved around my room, I tried my hardest to stay silent. But in a moment of panic, I accidentally pushed something over. The noise was loud in the quiet room, and I knew he had heard it. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear anything else. The man approached the closet, laughing in a way that made my skin crawl. I realized then I had to make a choice, fight or run. Everything inside me screamed to act. So when he opened the closet door, I didn't hesitate. I charged at him, using every bit of strength I had to bring him down and lock him in a tight grip. It was a fierce battle. He was much bigger and stronger than me. But somehow, I managed to overpower him. As soon as I felt him weaken, I released him and sprinted out of the house, running straight to my neighbor's place for help. My neighbors were quick to act, letting me in and calling the police for me. The officers arrived swiftly and entered our home. They found the man still inside and arrested him. Seeing him being led away in handcuffs, laughing at me with a disturbing look, made me feel sick. My mom rushed back home as soon as the police contacted her. I don't know what happened to that man after that night, and frankly, I don't ever want to know. The fear and the memory of his laugh still haunt me, reminding me of the night I faced a stranger in my own home. My mom and dad were leaving for a weekend trip, so it was up to me, a 15-year-old, to watch over my younger brothers. That day, a big storm was hitting our town, making everything outside look dark and scary. To have some fun and forget about the storm, we decided to play hide and seek in the house. In the middle of our game, I remembered I hadn't taken our dog, Max, out to pee. I told my brothers I'd be quick and left them hiding. While Max and I were outside, I noticed a strange car parked by our house, close to the street. It was a dark car, possibly a Toyota, but I wasn't sure. The rain made it hard to see clearly, and I couldn't tell if someone was inside the car. Feeling uneasy, I hurried back inside, made sure all the doors were locked, and checked every window. I didn't mention the car to my brothers. I didn't want to scare them. Just after getting back in, my phone buzzed with an alert from our doorbell camera. Someone was at the front door. With the storm raging outside, it was odd for anyone to visit. I checked the video and saw a man, probably in his 50s, standing there. Suddenly, he looked right into the camera, his eyes wide open. It sent chills down my spine. I decided not to alarm my brothers. Instead, I suggested we play a quiet game, where the quietest one would win a treat. Half an hour later, the man was gone from the camera's view. Still feeling worried but trying to stay strong, I peeked outside from each window. The mysterious car was still there, but there was no sign of the man. Then I remembered I hadn't checked the sunroom yet. Our sunroom was different because you could see outside from any part of it, but that also meant anyone outside could easily see you. As I made my way to the sunroom, the feeling of dread grew. The thought of someone watching from the dark, stormy outside made every step feel heavier. This part of the house felt more exposed than any other, a perfect place for the stranger to have moved to, hidden from the rest of the world by the storm's cloak. When I dared to look through the window again, my eyes met with the man's, hiding behind our air conditioner. I was about to call the police when our eyes locked. I stumbled back in shock, quickly getting up to look again, but he had vanished. I rushed to gather my brothers, dialing 911 as I did. Suddenly, a loud banging on our front door echoed through the house. "I can see you!" he shouted, his voice twisted and strange. He laughed darkly, hitting the door even harder. I ushered my brothers and our dog, Max, into the bathroom, whispering for them to be silent. I explained what was happening as I gently held Max's mouth to quiet his barks. Fear gripped me, fearing any noise might lead the man to us. In the cramped bathroom, the sound of our door being forced open filled the air, followed by the man's eerie laughter. The 911 operator assured me the police were on their way and urged us to stay hidden and quiet. The intruder, failing to find us, began rampaging through our house. The sounds of our belongings being smashed and broken were terrifying, but I forced myself to remain calm, painfully aware of how vulnerable we were without any means of defense. I whispered to the operator to ask the police to approach silently. The details blur together in my memory, but I remember hearing the man being restrained by the police. Peering out, I saw him handcuffed, struggling against the officers. Our home was in ruins. My parents cut their trip short and returned home to help us clean and recover from the ordeal. The fear of being alone at home still haunts me, and I doubt it will ever leave. I share this story as a warning. Always be cautious, and never open your door to strangers. Trust your instincts if something feels wrong. My name is Anna, and I'm 18 years old now. This scary thing happened to me when I was just 10. Back then, I lived with my mom and dad, and they were still together. Here's something you should know. I don't live in the United States. I won't tell you exactly where I'm from, but it's a place where bad things rarely happen. So this took place on a Friday night. My mom, dad, and 2 little brothers had gone out to buy some new stuff for my room from a store. I didn't feel like going with them, so I chose to stay at home. I spent some time watching TV, but soon, I really wanted some sweets because, well, it was Friday and I felt like I deserved a treat. I put on my jacket and walked to the closest shop, which was really not far from where we lived. It was about a 10-minute walk. In my country, it's pretty normal for kids around 8 to 10 years old to walk to a shop by themselves because there's hardly any crime. After I bought my sweets, I was walking back home when I saw a man. He was on a bike and looked like he had drunk too much because he couldn't ride straight. I just looked at him quickly and kept walking, but he made me feel scared. I began to walk faster. Suddenly, he shouted something at me. At first, I couldn't understand him, but then I heard him asking me to stop. I didn't listen and started to run instead. Even though he was on a bike, his drunkenness made it hard for him to follow me quickly. Near our house, there's a small forest that has a path through it. If you take this path, you can get home faster. So when I heard the man shouting, I ran into the forest path. Just after I made my turn, he zoomed past the entrance of the path, but then he saw me running. He shouted at me once more, but this time, I didn't look back. I kept running until I reached my house, hurried inside, and locked the door right away. Our living room has 2 big windows that let you see the front yard clearly. I didn't turn on any lights. Trying to be as quiet as possible, I went to the living room. I was out of breath and my heart felt like it was going to burst because I had run so fast. I had never been so scared in my life. I sneaked up to one of the windows and peeked through the blinds very carefully. I almost jumped out of my skin when I saw him. He was right there, standing just outside our door. He must have seen the blinds move because he started knocking on the door. I was frozen with fear and didn't know what to do. I thought about calling my mom to tell her what was happening. My heart felt like it was pounding out of my chest, and I was trying to figure out what to do next when, luckily, our neighbor drove into their driveway. The man at the door saw the car lights, quickly went back to his bike, and rode away. When my parents got back, I couldn't bring myself to tell them about what had happened. I'm not sure why I chose to keep it a secret. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. This kind of thing doesn't happen to me often, but it scared me more than anything ever has. Years later, I finally told my mom about that night. She was really shocked and scared when she heard what had happened. When I was 10, something scary happened to me. I lived in a small town in the southeast part of Ohio. Our home was in a group of duplexes, which are like 2 houses stuck together, one on top of the other. We lived in the bottom half of one of these. My dad had to go away for a few weeks, and on the night of this scary event, my mom was at work. I have 3 brothers and sisters. That evening, the lady who lives next door was looking after my 2 younger siblings. My sister Anna, who's 8, and I were over at our neighbor's place playing with her kid. Around 9:30 p.m., Anna and I went back to our place. We had only been there for about 15 minutes when we heard a knock on the door. We thought it might be another neighbor. I told Anna to peek through the little hole in the door to see who it was before opening it. She looked, then turned to me, looking a bit confused, and said, "I don't know this person." I moved her aside and looked through the hole myself. I didn't recognize the man either. He seemed to be around 40 or maybe a bit older, with a messy look. He wore a red flannel shirt under a jacket with dirty jeans and muddy boots. Anna and I were unsure what to do. I cautiously opened the door. The man didn't say his name, but told us he was a friend of our grandpa and knew our dad too. Anna and I were skeptical but talked to him for a bit, hoping he would just go away. But then he asked if our mom was home. Without thinking, I said she wasn't. He claimed he had talked to our mom earlier and wanted to hang out with us until she returned. I was at a loss for words and just said, "She's not here, so you can't come in." Then he suggested waiting inside with us for our mom to return, saying she wouldn't mind. Right then, my phone rang, making me jump. I glanced at the man and said, "That might be her. I'll see if you can come in," before quickly closing and locking the door quietly, hoping he wouldn't notice. I had no intention of letting him in, and the call wasn't from my mom. My friend, let's call her Jay, who lived not far from us, called me right after. Jay said her mom was on their porch, saw the strange man talking to Anna and me, and even noticed him peeking through our windows before he came to our door. Jay's mom had already called the police, and Jay wanted to know if we could sneak out and come to her place for safety. There was a way out. I grabbed Anna's hand, and we rushed to the bedroom we shared at the back of our house. I opened the window, helped Anna out, and then followed her. After closing the window behind us, we tiptoed around the back of the buildings, making sure the man didn't spot us until we reached Jay's house. Inside Jay's living room, we waited anxiously for the police and our mom to arrive. The police got there first, listened to our story, and then went to check our house. But the man was gone. They couldn't find him anywhere around our place. The police promised to keep an eye on the area, but that was all they could do for now. When my mom got back, she was in a rush to know if we were okay. She told us about her day, mentioning that she and the neighbor upstairs went to buy cigarettes earlier. She took my baby brother with her in his stroller. As they left the store, a man approached my mom, commenting that my brother looked familiar and asking about our dad. My family is pretty well known around here, and we all tend to look alike. My mom only gave him my dad's first name, Frank, but the man somehow knew our last name without her telling him. He claimed to know my grandpa, too. My mom didn't engage much with him after that, feeling uneasy, and made extra turns on the way home just in case he was following. That evening, all of us kids ended up sleeping in the living room with Mom. I haven't seen that man since, and I'm now 15. A few days later, I heard my mom discussing with a friend that she checked our apartment's security footage. At around 4 a.m. the day after the incident, the man returned and tried to open every window, but luckily, they were all locked. I can't stop thinking about what his intentions were, what could have happened if I had let him in, or if he had managed to break in through the windows. It's a chilling thought. When I was in school, I often found myself alone at home because my mom and dad worked late into the night. This was something I usually didn't mind. I liked spending time by myself, watching videos online or shows on Netflix. This particular event took place when I was around 15. Both of my parents were working and wouldn't be home until the early hours of the morning, around 3 a.m. So I made myself comfortable downstairs, surrounded by my dogs, and turned on the TV. The way our house is designed, there's a couch against a wall. This wall has a back door right behind it, covered by curtains. However, the curtains were shorter at the bottom because my dogs had chewed on them, leaving the lower part of the door visible. One night, as I was deep into watching Netflix in the dark, all my dogs were with me, except for Spike, my small dog, who preferred lying near the back door in the kitchen. Suddenly, I heard Spike growling. At first, I didn't pay much attention. Spike often growled at any little thing, even at his shadow for all I knew, so I told him to be quiet, thinking he was just making noise at nothing, and kept my eyes on the TV. But then, Spike backed into the living room, fur on end and still growling. This sight truly frightened me. I turned to look at the back door, and that's when I saw them. A pair of legs, likely belonging to a man, stood right there at the door. A chill went through me, and for a moment I was paralyzed with fear. It took me a second to realize this wasn't a trick of my eyes. There was actually someone outside, possibly trying to peer inside or even break in. I quietly made my way upstairs. I dialed the police, who seemed more annoyed than concerned, bombarding me with questions about the man's appearance, even though I hadn't seen anything but his legs. As I mentioned, all I could see were his legs. I rushed to my room, which has a view of the backyard. It was pitch black outside, and since we had no lights back there, visibility was almost zero. But for a brief moment, I caught the glow of a flashlight from the other side of our fence. As I headed upstairs, it hit me. I had no weapon. The only thing that came to mind were the large knives we kept in the kitchen. But that meant I had to go back downstairs. Our kitchen has a window above the sink, and as I went to grab a knife, I froze. There was the man, staring in through the window at me. His eyes were wide open like a hunter eyeing its catch. I couldn't help it. I screamed and dashed back to my room, locking the door behind me. The sounds of banging and my dogs barking filled the house. My heart raced as I realized my dogs were too small to fend off an intruder. If this man got inside, he could easily overpower them, and then me. But I was determined to prevent that from happening at all costs. It felt like an eternity before I heard the police sirens. I hurried downstairs to open the door for the officers, but they found no one. Despite my report of the banging noises, they said there were no signs anyone tried to break in. My mom arrived soon after, furious that the man had escaped. To this day, I don't know who he was or if he was ever caught for doing anything else. I just hope our paths never cross again. This story begins almost a year ago. I was 18 years old at that time. My mother decided to go to a music show with her boyfriend on a Saturday night. Her boyfriend, who did not live with us, was visiting for the weekend. He was a student, taking some online courses to finish his college degree. He enjoyed doing his schoolwork in our dining room. The dining room is the first room you see when you enter our house. It has a big window that looks out to the street. My mother's boyfriend would lift the curtains so our two small dogs could see outside. The dogs are quite small, so he only raised the curtains a little, just enough for the dogs to peek outside whenever they wished. So, my mother and her boyfriend left for the music show, leaving me alone at home. I didn't really mind, because it meant I could watch the big TV in the living room by myself. They were gone, and I settled in to watch some TV. About an hour later, I heard a knock at the door. It surprised me because it was now around 9 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the door's viewer and saw a man standing there, moving oddly, like he was jumping from one foot to the other, as if he was nervous or something. I chose not to open the door and went to the kitchen to grab a knife, just in case he tried to break in. I've learned some self-defense and know how to handle a knife. After calming down for about 20 minutes, I put on my headphones to listen to music and relax a bit more. I like walking around the house while listening to music, so I did. I wandered into the dining room and was about to turn around to go back to watching TV, but that's when I saw him. The man I had seen was now lying down by the dining room window, peeking through the small gap in the curtains that we usually left for the dogs to look outside. He had to pretty much lay flat on the ground to see through that tiny space. We locked eyes for what felt like 30 seconds, and I quickly ran to grab the knife I'd taken out earlier. I immediately called my neighbor, who was a police officer, and explained what was happening. He lived just 6 houses away and arrived in about 2 minutes. By the time he got here, the strange man had disappeared. I tried to describe the man to my neighbor, but all I could really remember were his eyes, which wasn't much help. I decided against calling my mom, thinking she wouldn't take me seriously. Then the very next day, there was a news report about one of our neighbors who was found dead in a pond in my backyard. Everyone thought it was either suicide or an unfortunate accident, but the pond isn't deep at all, maybe 5 or 6 feet at most. It seems strange to think someone could drown in a pond that shallow. A week later, another shocking news story emerged. It turned out there was a hidden facility for people with mental health issues in our area. This place, just 10 houses down from mine, was home to about 11 individuals, and it was reported that 2 of them had escaped before the police could intervene. I can't say for sure if these events are related, but the timing of everything is just too strange to ignore. I was 17 years old when this scary thing happened to me. After finishing high school, we had to leave our home because it was falling apart, and someone else bought it. We packed everything and moved to a small town in North Carolina called Robinsonville to live in a house near the mountains that belonged to my grandma's husband. Living in the mountains means you don't have many neighbors close by. Most of the houses near us were empty, and it felt like no one else was around. I like to hike up the mountain alone, listening to music, and I love to keep my window open to let sunlight and fresh air into my room. One night, while my family was sleeping downstairs, my sister and I were still awake in our room upstairs. Suddenly, the electricity went out. I took my flashlight, grabbed some colored pencils and paper, and sat on the floor to draw since there was nothing else to do. My sister went to the bathroom. She had just left when I heard a man's deep voice say, "Hey, baby," from somewhere in my room. I was so scared I couldn't move. My first thought was that the voice came from the closet. I stayed still for a few seconds, completely terrified. Then I jumped up, ran out of the room, and slammed the door shut behind me. It was around midnight when this all happened. I ran and started knocking hard on the bathroom door, and my sister came out, confused and scared by how panicked I looked. I tried to explain to her what I heard, and she got scared too. Together, we went down to tell our grandma, who was half asleep. She gave me her gun from under her pillow and told us to go back to our room. We didn't go back to our room, though. Instead, we stayed in the living room all night long. We couldn't sleep at all. We spent the whole night playing board games and talking about old times from school. I think my sister knew I was really scared and tried to distract me. When the sun came up and the power was back on, we bravely went back to our room. That's when we saw that the closet door was wide open, and so was the window. From that day until I moved out a few months later, I always made sure the window was locked and the blinds were closed. Thinking back on it still scares me. It wasn't taken seriously enough at the time. There was definitely a man in my room that night. He could have come out at any time and hurt us. I'm just thankful nothing happened. When I was 15, I was often home by myself. From early morning until the evening, Monday to Friday, the house was mine alone. Being by myself was something I usually enjoyed, although sometimes it felt too quiet. Back then, I had a boyfriend named Tom who had a job that kept him busy. One summer morning, while I was tidying up the house around 7 a.m., strange noises caught my attention. It was during my summer break, so I had no school to go to. The sounds seemed to be coming from my backyard, loud enough to make me take off my headphones. I stopped what I was doing, listening closely. It sounded like someone was either knocking on glass or throwing stones at it. The door to the backyard was hidden behind blinds, and nothing like this had ever happened before. I first thought it might be Tom trying to play a trick on me, but then I remembered he was at work, so it couldn't be him. The day was still, without a hint of wind, and the morning heat was beginning to rise. I was honestly too frightened to see what was on the other side of those blinds, but I eventually gathered the courage to yank them open. But there was nothing there, not even a single stone near the door. As I turned around, I noticed a shadow dart across the room that was meant for guests. The layout of the ground floor included a garage entry, a bathroom for visitors, and a food storage closet. My parents were on a business trip, a 3-hour drive away, leaving me unable to reach out to them. So, I called Tom, too scared to even consider moving from my spot. It took him around 45 minutes to get to me. I shared what happened, but he didn't seem too worried. He checked the guest room, and everywhere else I thought I saw the shadow move, but he found nothing, telling me, "There's nobody here, don't worry." We then went to my room, a place where I always felt secure. My door had to stay open though, because my room would get too warm otherwise. The quiet of the house was suddenly more unnerving than comforting. With Tom there, I felt a bit better, but the incident left us both uneasy. The mystery of what I saw, or thought I saw, lingered in the air, making the familiar spaces of my home feel strange and unfamiliar. The day dragged on, shadowed by the morning's events, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Tom and I were sitting in my room when suddenly a cold wind blew through, even though all the windows were closed. I looked outside my door and saw a very tall figure standing there. This person was dressed in a big coat and overalls, with black shoes on his feet. But his face? I couldn't see it at all. I pointed him out to Tom, but when he looked, the figure had vanished. Later, we went to the kitchen to make some food. Near the window above the sink, I noticed a shorter shadow looking around the corner. I joked, "Tom, stop trying to scare me. thinking he was playing tricks again. But Tom wasn't anywhere near. He was still in the garage. When I glanced back, the shadow was gone. I told Tom what I saw, and he checked every room. My mom's, the bathroom, mine, and my dad's. But just like before, he found nothing. Hours passed, and after Tom left, I was alone waiting for my parents. When they got back, I told them everything. My dad asked for a description of what I'd seen, and when I told him, he went completely quiet. Then my dad shared something that scared me more than anything else. He said those figures sounded like his own parents, my grandparents, who had passed away over 30 years ago. Growing up in that house, I started seeing more and more shadows, and sometimes I could even hear whispers. It's gotten to the point where seeing and hearing these spirits feels normal to me. I've even started to think some of them might have followed me to my new apartment. The idea that these presences, these echoes of the past, might be sticking close to me is something I'm still trying to understand. Around 8 years back, I was staying with my mom and stepdad in a small town, not far from where I used to live alone. I had fallen quite ill a year before, which forced me to move back in with them for care. I was between 22 and 23 years old at the time. My mom had settled into this house around 3 years ago, and my stepdad had been living with her for about 8 years. The house never felt right to me. It was one of those modern homes in a big housing area with about 100 other homes, all looking almost the same with just 5 designs repeated. Our home was apart from the others, at the end of a quiet street, bordered by a line of trees and bushes, with a metal fence separating us from another road. This place was much quieter than the bustling city where I grew up in Wales. I've got to say, I really didn't like that house. There were 3 doors to get inside. The main door, a side door, and then the double doors leading out from a sunroom. Plus, there was a garage attached right next to the kitchen. The number of entrances always unnerved me. My stepdad often had to travel for work, and sometimes my mom would join him. I loved having the house to myself during these times. It gave me a sense of freedom I missed since falling sick. However, I could never sleep well alone in that house. I'd often stay up very late, taking short naps with the hallway light on and my bedroom door open so I could see the stairs from my bed. One night, while they were gone, I found myself awake at 2 a.m., sitting in the living room with my laptop, the only source of light coming from a lamp behind me. Every door in the house was locked tight. I made sure of it, checking each one twice before feeling safe enough to draw the heavy curtains closed. These curtains were so thick they blocked out all light, ensuring that the glow from the lamp behind me couldn't be seen from outside. The living room door was nearly shut, leaving me in a cozy bubble of light with my laptop on my knees and my cat sleeping at my feet. Looking back, I can't quite remember what I was doing on my laptop. Probably just aimlessly browsing the internet, likely lost in the endless scroll of Tumblr. Suddenly, my cat woke up. She lifted her head, ears perked, focusing intently towards the front door. From my spot on the couch, blocked by the slightly ajar living room door, I couldn't see the entrance. Initially, I didn't pay her any mind. She's a skittish cat, often spooked by the smallest of disturbances. But then, she became fully alert, fixated on the living room door. That's when I noticed it. The faint glow of the porch light illuminating the hallway, visible through the window in the door. I felt a twinge of concern, but wasn't immediately frightened. After all, the security light has a habit of flicking on for the most benign reasons, like a fox darting past the house. Compelled by a mix of curiosity and a growing sense of unease, I got up and approached the living room door. Before I could reach it, however, the sound of the door handle slowly turning made my blood run cold. The door, an old wooden one with a simple lock, creaked ominously as the handle was pulled down. I had taken extra precautions earlier, locking the door and sliding the flimsy bolts at the top and bottom into place for added security. These measures now seemed laughably inadequate as the handle moved silently, accompanied by a soft rattle from the door. My heart pounded against my ribs, fear gripping me tightly. Grabbing my phone from the coffee table, I quickly keyed in 999, ready to call for help at a moment's notice. I hesitated at the living room door, every instinct screaming at me to be cautious. With the porch light casting a soft glow, I could make out the shadowy figure of a man through the frosted glass, standing off to the side. The door handle was pressed down as far as it would go, a clear sign of someone's intent to enter. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. The door handle kept moving, trying to open the door, but it stayed put, thanks to the locks and bolts. Suddenly, the door seemed to press in slightly, as if the person on the other side was pushing against it. Overcoming my shock, I yelled, "Hey, what are you doing?" in a loud voice. The handle quickly snapped back to its place. I stepped forward into the hallway, now fully visible to the figure outside, and he could see me too. We stared at each other, a silent standoff that felt like it lasted forever. Then he turned and ran off into the darkness of the driveway, disappearing from sight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept walking around the house, double-checking that every door was securely locked. The next day, my mom and stepdad returned, and I told them everything. My mom suggested it might have been a drunk person, confused and at the wrong house, trying to ease my worry. But the incident stayed with me. Years later, after I had moved back to Wales, a similar event happened to my mom. She was alone in the house, with my stepdad away. It was around 1 a.m., and she was in bed with her laptop, the cat beside her on the stairs. Suddenly, the cat looked towards the front door, alert. My mom watched, then went to see for herself. Through the glass, she saw someone trying the door handle again. Quickly, she turned on the lights and shouted, scaring them off into the night. I can't say for sure if these two incidents are connected, given the time between them. But to whoever keeps trying to enter my parents' house, please stop. We would really appreciate it. I'm 23 and I still live with my mom and dad. One day they were both gone, and I was in our front yard shooting hoops. While playing, I happened to look up at one of the windows upstairs and saw a lady standing there. She wasn't my mom or my sister, just some unknown lady. When she saw me staring, she quickly moved away from the window. I went inside and straight upstairs to check the family room, but she was gone. I looked everywhere, all the bedrooms, the bathroom, every single closet. And then I searched the ground floor, which has the living room, kitchen, a dining area, another bedroom, and more closets. The last place to check was the basement. I didn't really think she'd be down there. It's not a big basement, just a couple of sofas, a small bar, and 2 closets. There weren't many hiding spots, but when I opened the second closet, I was super nervous. This was the last place someone could hide. I pulled open the door fast and pushed myself inside, ready to confront her if she was there. But I only found a bunch of coats and hangers. I was so puzzled. I knew I saw that woman. It's not something you just make up. I went back to the main floor and yelled loudly, telling whoever was in the house to leave. I was so loud that our neighbor next door came over to see if I was all right. I explained how I saw a lady in our upstairs window. He even helped me look again. When we didn't find anyone, I figured she must have sneaked out the back door, which I had left unlocked when I went to get the basketball. After my neighbor left, I locked all the doors, called my parents, and told them what happened. They were worried, but wanted me to check if anything was stolen. Thankfully, everything valuable was still there. Now let's move to what happened later that night. That night, after making sure the house was secure, I tried to sleep, but it wasn't easy. My thoughts were all over the place because it's not every day you see a stranger in your house. But my inability to sleep quickly became a blessing. As I was finally starting to drift off, I heard some noises. I had my ceiling fan on, so it wasn't totally quiet in my room. At first, I didn't pay much attention to the sounds, thinking they were nothing. But then, the noises began to sound like they were made by a person. I rolled over, and there she was, crawling out from under my bed. She stood up, towering over my bed. I screamed even louder than before, jumped out of bed, and tackled her to the ground. I held her neck, demanding to know who she was. Then the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor again. I grabbed the woman, who was tall and dirty, and dragged her to the front door. She fought back, scratching me and leaving 2 scars on my right arm. When I opened the door, my neighbor rushed in to help me hold her down. That's when I called the cops. While we waited for the police, the woman kept screaming, cursing, and even threatening us. She looked and acted like someone high on drugs and going through a bad time. When the police finally arrived, one of them recognized her immediately. They had dealt with her many times. Her name, funnily enough, was Karen. Watching her get into the police car was a relief. I thanked my neighbor for his quick help. That night, I was still a bit scared, but also strangely satisfied. I can't quite explain why, but it felt good to know she was caught. A few months back, I moved into a tiny single-story house near my job. Before this, my daily commute was nearly an hour, so this new place was a big change for the better. The area was unfamiliar to me, except for my workplace, making it feel like a whole new world. One evening, after finishing work at 6 p.m., I headed straight home. I had to work the next day, and didn't plan on doing much. Maybe just relax, have some food, and then sleep. I drove into my garage and entered my house, putting some leftover pizza in the oven to warm up. While waiting for the pizza, I heard my doorbell ring. It startled me because I hadn't heard it before, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the front door and saw a woman standing there. She appeared to be around 50 years old with long gray hair. I opened the door and greeted her, asking how I could assist her. She gave a broad smile and mentioned she'd noticed I was new to the neighborhood. We chatted briefly. She inquired about my background, whether I had a family, and other general small talk topics. After a short conversation, she bid me goodnight and left. I realized I hadn't even gotten her name, but figured she was probably a neighbor from down the street. However, there was something peculiar about her, something unsettling. I couldn't pinpoint it. Maybe it was just because she was older and a stranger. I returned to my kitchen, grabbed my pizza, and settled on the couch to find something to watch on YouTube. I chose a commentary video for background noise while eating. However, about 10 minutes later, I heard a strange noise coming from outside. As I paused to listen, the sound seemed like faint whispers mixed with the rustling of leaves. Curious and a bit uneasy, I peered through the window but saw nothing unusual in the darkening evening. I decided to investigate further. Opening my front door, the cool night air hit me. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the distant sound of a car passing by. I stepped outside, looking around, trying to locate the source of the noise. As I walked towards the edge of my yard, the whispering sound grew a bit louder. It was hard to make out any words, but it definitely sounded like someone was talking. I looked around, trying to spot anyone nearby, but the street was empty. Just then, I heard a rustling in the bushes near my fence. My heart raced as I approached cautiously, half expecting to find an animal or maybe someone hiding there. But as I got closer, the rustling stopped abruptly. I stood still, waiting, but the silence remained unbroken. Feeling a mix of relief and confusion, I decided to head back inside. Maybe it was just the wind or my imagination. As I turned to go back, I thought I saw a shadow move quickly across my lawn. I blinked, trying to focus in the dim light, but there was nothing there. A bit unnerved, I hurried back into the house, locking the door behind me. I decided it was best to forget about it and just relax for the evening. As I sat down, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something strange was happening in this new neighborhood. But little did I know this was just the beginning of a series of mysterious events that would unfold in the coming days. I muted the TV, hearing the sound of a car engine idling loudly. Curious, I got up and peeked through the front window. There, parked right outside my house, was a car with its engine running but its headlights off. Glancing up and down the street, I noticed it was otherwise empty with plenty of other parking spots available. Yet this car was right in front of my place. I stood there, observing the car for a few minutes, but nothing changed. Eventually, I returned to my couch. However, the sound of the engine continued to fill the air outside my house for a good half hour before it finally stopped. I paused the TV again and listened intently, but heard nothing else. Curiosity getting the better of me, I walked back to the window. The car was still there, now silent. The street was empty, just this one car sitting outside. Feeling a bit uneasy, I closed the blinds for privacy and started to tidy up. That's when I heard a soft thump from the other side of the house. Already a bit nervous, I walked towards the hallway, glancing towards the kitchen. For a brief moment, I caught the shadow of someone moving away from the back door, as if they realized I'd seen them and were trying to hide. I heard their footsteps hurrying around the house towards the front. Rushing to the window, I saw a man quickly get into the parked car and drive off. Immediately, I went to the back door and opened it to investigate. I noticed that the handle on the outside was unusually loose, as if someone had been tampering with it. Even a gentle tug on the handle revealed the inner mechanisms of the lock, suggesting that the intruder was close to breaking in. I couldn't help but think back to the old lady who visited earlier. It might seem far-fetched, but her questions about whether I lived alone now seemed suspicious. Could she have been scouting for potential targets? Although it's been months since this incident, I haven't seen either her or the man again. Since then, I've been more cautious. I installed better locks on my doors and got some security cameras. Occasionally, I still feel uneasy, especially when I'm home alone at night. The memory of that car parked outside and the figure at my back door lingers in my mind, reminding me that my quiet neighborhood might not be as safe as I thought. I started paying more attention to the people and cars around my house. Every unknown face or vehicle now raises a question in my mind. Could they be watching me? Planning something? The thought is unsettling. I also reached out to my neighbors, asking if they'd noticed anything unusual. Most hadn't seen anything, but one mentioned seeing a car parked in front of my house that night. They assumed it was a friend visiting me. This little piece of information made me even more vigilant. I'm not sure what will happen next, but I'm prepared. I keep telling myself it's probably nothing, just a series of strange coincidences. But deep down, I can't shake off the feeling that something is not right. The quiet of the neighborhood now feels like a deceptive calm before a storm. And so, my days and nights are filled with a sense of watchfulness, waiting for something, anything, that might unravel the mystery of that night. But for now, all I can do is stay alert and keep an eye on the quiet streets of my seemingly peaceful neighborhood. Last year, I moved into a rental house in a small, quiet old mining town in Virginia. Living by myself, I enjoyed the peace. On a warm spring night, I dozed off in my living room, lounging on my comfy recliner. However, a disturbing noise woke me up around 4 a.m., the sound of my doorknob being turned. At first, I thought maybe someone got the wrong house by mistake, but the doorknob kept turning, over and over. I couldn't see who was outside since I didn't have a peephole or a window near the door, so I walked up to the door and shouted, "Hey, you got the wrong house!" But then, the door started shaking as if someone was trying to break in, and I heard a fist banging against it. I yelled louder, "Seriously, go away! You've got the wrong place!" The person outside then made a deep growling sound like a wild beast, and started making really scary, strange noises. I quickly grabbed a kitchen knife for protection and called the police. I waited anxiously for them to arrive. 2 police officers came, but the mysterious person had already left. They looked around my house carefully but found no one. They advised me to call again if anything else happened. After they left, I tried to continue with my day. It was around 5 a.m., but I couldn't sleep anymore. I was too worried about the whole incident. Later that day, when I returned home from work, I felt uneasy, thinking maybe someone had broken in. I knew it was probably just my nerves, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that the person might return. But when I got home, everything seemed fine. There was no sign of a break-in or anything unusual. Later that night, around 9:30 or 10 p.m., I was relaxing on my couch, engrossed in a book, when suddenly I heard a loud thud. It was quick but startling. It sounded like it was coming from inside my house, but I wasn't sure. I tried to ignore it and went back to reading. Not long after, I heard what sounded like muffled talking. I couldn't understand what was being said. It was faint, but definitely there. Wondering where the noise was coming from, I couldn't help but think I was going crazy. But then, it hit me. Someone was definitely in my house. Panic set in, and I had this awful feeling that the same stranger from before had returned. I looked around, but everything went quiet. Suddenly, a terrifying scream shattered the silence. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before. A man screaming with a demonic yet human ferocity. My heart was racing, and a thought struck me like lightning. The crawl space! I hesitated to call the police, not wanting to feel foolish again, so I decided to check it out myself. I went out the back door and circled around the house. It was easier to get to the crawl space from the outside. I had never actually seen inside the crawl space before this. There, I found a man, either asleep, pretending, or possibly high on drugs. I kept my cool and didn't confront him. Instead, I immediately called the police and stepped away from the crawl space. When the police arrived, they pulled him out and took him to the hospital, then to jail. This man had been living under my house for who knows how long. He had a sleeping bag, a lantern, and a stash of food down there. Discovering this left me terrified and sleepless for weeks. How had I not noticed someone living under my house all this time? I'm a 30-year-old guy, and I live in a 2-story house with my sister Anna. Our house is pretty unique because it has 2 kitchens, one on each floor. Anna usually stays on the ground floor, and I have the upper floor to myself. She's not around much because she spends a lot of time at her boyfriend's place, which is quite a drive away, about 20 miles. So, there you have it. I'm 30 and often home alone. Now, I don't think I should ever get scared just because I'm by myself in the house. But, I'll be honest, sometimes it does get to me. Let me tell you about this one night. I was alone, as usual, lounging in my living room and watching a horror movie. The movie's name was Terror in the Shadows. Quite a spooky one. My part of the house is designed with no walls separating the living room, dining area, and kitchen. It's all one big open space. The couch where I was sitting is right in the middle of this area. The way I was sitting on the couch, my back was facing a large portion of the room. Now, for someone who gets scared easily, this is not the best position to be in, especially when you're watching a scary movie alone. I won't lie, even with just the flickering TV light in the otherwise dark room, I kept looking over my shoulder quite often. I think that's pretty normal for anyone, regardless of age. Anyway, after the movie ended, I went through my usual routine, brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights, and then went to bed. But that night, my sleep was short-lived. I woke up around 1 a.m., not really sure why at first. Then I heard it. A voice coming from downstairs. It sounded exactly like Anna. The voice was inside the house, so she wasn't outside calling me to open the door or anything. But I was sure it was her voice. Hearing Anna's voice in the middle of the night was confusing, especially since I was still half asleep and my mind wasn't clear. The only thought in my head was that she might have needed me, or maybe she was having some kind of argument with her boyfriend. I climbed out of bed, feeling really sleepy, and stumbled into the pitch-black hallway. Flicking on the hallway lights, I made my way through the living room. That's when I heard Anna's voice again, clearer this time, calling my name from downstairs. "So," I shouted back, asking what was up as I headed down the dark staircase. I tried to find the light switch in the downstairs foyer, but couldn't seem to locate it. I mean it when I say I was really groggy and not thinking straight. I walked down her small hallway towards her kitchen. Finally finding a light switch, I turned it on. The kitchen light slowly brightened up her little apartment space, including the living room. But even in the dim light, I could see there was nobody there. Neither Anna nor her boyfriend were anywhere to be seen. I checked her bedroom, but it was empty too. I called out her name loudly, but there was no response. However, just after I shouted, I heard a sound like something dropping to the floor in Anna's bedroom, which I had just checked and found empty. Feeling scared like a child, I rushed back upstairs to my room and grabbed my phone. I tried calling Anna a few times, but she didn't answer. Locked in my room, I started wondering if I had just imagined the whole thing. Eventually, I fell back asleep. In the morning, I woke up to texts from Anna asking why I had called her so late. When I asked if she was home last night, she said no, she was at her boyfriend's. I went down to check her bedroom to see what might have fallen, but there was nothing on the floor. This made me think I might have imagined everything. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination because the other possibilities were too scary to consider. But I've never had hallucinations or sleep problems before, so the clearness of hearing Anna's voice and that noise in her room really scared me. Once upon a time, my mom and dad changed our garage into a big bedroom that was also a place to hang out. This is where we would play video games and where my parents had their parties. I was about 10 years old, and it was just the second or third time I was at home alone, as my brothers and sisters were all out for different reasons. Of course, I was super excited and stayed up late playing games on our PlayStation 2. It was really late at night when I started hearing a weird noise. It was like someone was tapping on the window. You see, when my parents changed the garage, they put in a new wall with a window and a regular door, just like the ones in most houses. These even had those slide and turn locks. At first, I didn't think the noise was anything strange. I thought it was just from my game. The noise sounded like someone tapping their fingers in a pattern. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, then again, really fast. It kept going on, and this tapping went on for like 5 minutes. Then I realized it wasn't from my game when I heard a knock and the door handle moved. I got really scared. I tiptoed to the door to check if it was locked. Both locks were open, but the door was sticky and hard to open, so it seemed locked if you didn't try hard. I quickly locked both locks, making a loud noise, hoping the person outside would know they couldn't get in. The tapping and knocking didn't stop. It just kept going. I started to feel really scared. I thought about calling my parents, but I didn't want them to worry or think I couldn't handle being alone. The tapping sound seemed to be getting louder and more urgent. I wondered who could be outside at such a late hour. I didn't dare to look through the window. My heart was racing, and I felt my hands shaking. Suddenly there was a louder knock, almost like someone was trying to break in. I held my breath, hoping they would go away. The room felt colder, and I could see my breath in the air. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stay warm and quiet. Then something strange happened. The room suddenly got warmer and the tapping and knocking stopped. I listened carefully, but there was only silence. I wondered if the person had left, but I was too afraid to check. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do next. After that, I heard a deep sigh, like from an older man, followed by a really weird laugh. It was creepy. Next, the knocking on the door got even louder. It sounded like he was hitting the door as hard as he could. I was just standing there, too scared to move, and then the noise stopped. He went to one of the windows nearby and tried to look inside, but we had a blanket over it. Even though I couldn't see him clearly, I could see his shadow, and it scared me a lot. I didn't know what to do and felt like I couldn't move. Then he went back to the door. That's when he said, "Let me in, love. I'm cold and hungry. Don't you want to be nice to your neighbor?" I quickly turned off the light, ran to my bedroom, and hid in my closet. It was really dark in there. I covered myself with my blanket and stayed as quiet as I could. I waited there for what felt like forever until my parents came back home. They were out celebrating their wedding anniversary. I didn't tell them about what happened. I was young and was more worried about getting in trouble for staying up past my bedtime than about the strange man at the door. I lay there in the closet, listening to the quiet house, wondering if the man was still outside. Every little noise made me jump. I kept thinking about what he said, wondering if he really was a neighbor or someone else. The thought of someone trying to get into our house was so scary. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing I knew, my parents were home. I heard them talking and moving around the house. I felt relieved, but also a bit guilty for not telling them what happened. The next day, everything seemed normal. The sun was shining, and it was just a regular day. But I couldn't stop thinking about the night before. I kept looking out the window, half expecting to see the man again. But there was no one there. I decided to be more careful from then on. I made sure the doors and windows were always locked, especially when I was home alone. The memory of that night stayed with me, making me feel a bit nervous whenever I was by myself. One evening, I was working late in my small office at home, trying to finish a really important report that was due in a couple of days. I had made myself a cup of tea to stay awake and focused. Working late into the night was something I often had to do for my job, and I always found it hard to keep my mind sharp when I started feeling sleepy. So there I was, typing away in my office, and it was around 11 p.m. Suddenly, I heard a knock at my front door. This surprised me, and I stopped what I was doing to listen. I stood up and made my way down the long hallway to the front door, wondering who could possibly be visiting at such a late hour. As I walked, I thought about how strange it was for someone to come to my door at this time of night. Reaching the door, I peered through the peephole, but to my surprise, there was no one standing on my porch. Confused, I stepped back, thinking maybe I had imagined the knock. After all, my office was on the other side of the house, and I was really focused on my work. Maybe the sound wasn't from the front door after all. I shrugged it off and decided to go back to my office. I thought maybe I should have been more concerned about the mysterious knock, but I was so tired and focused on finishing my work that I quickly forgot about it. I sat back down at my computer and continued typing, trying to make progress on my report. Time passed and nothing else unusual happened, but I was feeling more and more tired, my eyes struggling to stay open. Just as I was about to give up and go to bed, something caught my eye. I reached for my tea, and that's when I saw it. A pair of eyes staring at me through the window across the room. In that brief moment, I could tell it was a man, but he ran away as soon as our eyes met. My heart raced and I was frozen in place, staring at the window, shocked and a little scared. It was so unexpected and strange. After a few moments, I managed to get up and hurriedly covered the window. I had no idea who that person was or why he was looking into my house, especially so late at night. I quickly left my office and went back to the front of the house, checking through the peephole again, hoping to see if he was in my front yard. But there was no sign of him. The night was quiet, and the street outside was empty. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of what just happened, my mind racing with questions and a hint of fear. After checking the back window and finding no one there, my heart was racing, and I wasn't sleepy anymore. The quietness of my house started to make me nervous. Was that man still around, or had he left? I decided to take action. I went back to my office, grabbed my phone, and planned to call the police while keeping an eye on the doors and windows. But as I reached the end of the hallway, I froze. There stood a large figure in the back of my living room. This person was tall and dressed in bulky clothes, probably to hide who he was. But his eyes, they weren't the same as the ones I had seen at the window. This was a different man. Without a second's delay, he started running towards me. Panicking, I dashed back to my office, locking the door behind me. I leaned against it, ready for him to try to break it down. But when he got to the door, he just stopped. He didn't try to get in. Instead, he started pacing back and forth in the hallway. Then from the other side of the house, I heard it again, a light knocking. The man outside my office door began walking towards the living room. Everything went silent. I was pressed against the door, waiting, not hearing a sound. I called the police, whispering into the phone, begging them to hurry. I waited for what felt like forever until I finally heard the sirens and the police entering my house. They unlocked my front door and searched the house, but they didn't find either of the men. I still have no idea how the first man got inside or what they were planning. I think they were using knocks to communicate, but what about that first knock I heard? Every time I think about that night, I get chills. How long had one man been watching me? How long was the other inside my house? I was lucky it didn't turn out worse, but the thought of them possibly returning is frightening. Relying on luck for my safety isn't something I'm comfortable with. For over 10 years, I've enjoyed a peaceful existence in Utah, away from the hustle and bustle of city life. My home is a modest cabin in a small community where everyone leads a similar lifestyle. The center of the town has all the necessary shops, but most residents, including myself, live in cabins or homes spread out a few miles away, surrounded by either farmland or just open space. I don't engage in farming. However, I do own a sizable piece of grassy land that's adjacent to some mountains. The incident I'm about to share occurred nearly 10 months ago. It was a typical evening around 8 p.m., and I was outside sitting by my fire pit working on my laptop. This was my usual routine, except on snowy evenings. It was a serene way to wrap up my day before heading to sleep. But this particular night was unlike any other. I had been outside for about an hour, deeply focused on my laptop, when suddenly, through the crackling sounds of the fire, I heard a noise. Raising my eyes, I spotted a man standing across the fire, roughly 15 feet away. He appeared to be in his 40s, a common sight in these parts, with a broad build and a thick gray beard. Rising from my chair, I confronted him. "What are you doing here? Where did you come from?" I tried to sound firm, masking the tremble in my voice. The man's expression was unsettling, as if he was contemplating something dreadful. Then his gaze shifted past me towards my cabin. Keeping my eyes fixed on him, I watched as he moved towards the front of my cabin. He stopped at one of the windows, took a quick glance inside, muttered something, and then began walking away. I called out, demanding to know his intentions, adding a few choice words for good measure. However, he simply continued walking, disappearing into the area where the grass met the trees. His presence there, especially at such a late hour, was no coincidence. His behavior was peculiar, as if he was on a specific mission and had no regard for invading my privacy. The incident left me uneasy. The man's actions and his complete disregard for my confrontation were alarming. It seemed as though he was searching for something, and his boldness in approaching my cabin was unsettling. I couldn't help but wonder if this was a random occurrence or if there was a deeper reason behind his visit. His uninvited presence at my secluded cabin, particularly at night, raised many questions. What was he looking for? Why did he choose my cabin? His mysterious behavior hinted at intentions that were anything but benign. Despite the unsettling encounter, I couldn't let this incident disrupt my life. However, it did prompt me to be more cautious, especially during the evenings. I started locking my doors more diligently and became more aware of my surroundings, particularly when I was outside at night. The tranquility of my usual evenings was now tinged with a sense of vigilance, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than before. The days following the incident were uneventful, but the memory of the mysterious man lingered in my mind. I wondered if I would ever see him again, or if he was just a random wanderer who happened upon my cabin. But deep down, I had a nagging feeling that there was more to his visit than what met the eye. As the days turned into weeks, the incident gradually faded into the background of my daily life, but it never completely left my thoughts. Then, about a month after the first encounter, something happened that reignited my concern. After the unsettling encounter with the stranger, I quickly extinguished the fire and hurried inside my cabin. I made sure to lock everything up tightly and fetched my sidearm, just to be on the safe side. I doubted the man would return, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of uncertainty. In this remote area, reaching out to the police wasn't a quick solution. They would take too long to arrive, leaving me to fend for myself. I stayed awake for several hours, well beyond my usual bedtime, keeping my senses alert for any unusual sounds or movements. The exact time escapes me, but it must have been between 1 and 2 a.m. when exhaustion finally overcame me, and I fell asleep on the couch. My intention was to remain vigilant, but sleep took over. Waking up later, I was greeted by a strange, continuous noise. It sounded like wind whistling through the house. Confused and groggy, I sat up and noticed the front door standing wide open. Rushing over, I scanned the darkness outside, but saw nothing. I quickly shut and locked the door, then faced the chilling possibility that someone might be inside the cabin with me. For a tense minute, I stood by the door, listening intently for any signs of an intruder. My cabin was small, so any noise, even faint breathing, would be noticeable. But all I could hear was the occasional creak of the wood as the wind blew outside. I cautiously moved through the hallway, checking each room thoroughly, peering into every corner, and opening all the doors. Fortunately, there was no one inside. I couldn't bring myself to sleep after that. Once dawn broke, I drove to the town and reported the incident to the police, suspecting that the man I had seen earlier was the intruder. However, the motive behind the break-in was baffling. There were a few small items missing, indicating that he had indeed entered and wandered around my cabin while I was asleep. Yet, nothing of significant value was taken. Also, he hadn't harmed me, which only deepened the mystery of his intentions. Without understanding why he targeted my cabin, I was left wondering if he might return. The police took down my report, but there wasn't much they could do without more information. I returned home, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. The incident had disturbed the peace I had always felt in my quiet, secluded life. I found myself double-checking the locks on the doors and windows more frequently and keeping a closer eye on my surroundings, especially at night. In the days that followed, I pondered over the incident, trying to make sense of it. The man's actions and the items he took didn't add up. Was it a random act of theft? Or was there a deeper, more sinister reason behind his intrusion? The uncertainty of it all was unsettling. I hoped that this was a one-time occurrence, but without any clear answers, I couldn't be sure. The peaceful solitude of my cabin life had been disrupted, and now a shadow of doubt and caution hung over me. When I was younger, I often found myself alone at home. This was mostly because my mom, a hardworking nurse, was raising me on her own, and her job required her to work unpredictable hours. Plus, my older brother, who had gone off to college, wasn't around much. One particular night, while my mom was working a night shift, I had my friend Lily over. It was the weekend, and we spent the evening watching movies and just hanging out. However, Lily had to leave early because her parents were strict about her curfew. So there I was, left to my own devices, lounging in my room and watching TV. My bedroom is on the upper floor of our house, with a clear view of the backyard. That night, a strange noise caught my attention. It sounded like one of the chairs on our deck being moved. Curious, I peeked out the window, and to my surprise, I saw someone sitting in one of the chairs. At first, I thought it might be Lily who had come back for some reason, as she had left just a few minutes before. I called out her name, but the person looked up, and it definitely wasn't Lily. I quickly pulled back from the window, my heart racing. I didn't recognize the person, especially in the darkness. I grabbed my phone and texted some friends in our group chat, asking if they were playing a prank on me, but those who replied were just as confused as I was. None of them were behind this. Despite feeling terrified, I couldn't help but be curious, so I cautiously approached the window again for another look. The person was still there, gazing up at my window. This time I could tell it was a man, and he had definitely seen me. I quickly moved away from the window and turned off the TV, not wanting to draw any more attention. I curled up in my bed, hugging my knees to my chest, sitting in the dark. I was too scared to even check my phone, fearing the light from the screen might alert him. During those long minutes, I sat there frozen, not daring to move. The open window made me extra cautious. Any sound might alert the stranger outside. I hoped he'd think I wasn't in the room anymore. After what felt like an eternity but was probably just 5 minutes, I decided to take a peek again. Gathering all my courage, I slowly crept towards the window. My heart sank when I saw he was still there, still staring up at my window. Instead of panicking, I tried to confront him. "What do you want?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. That's when I noticed his shoulders shaking like he was laughing silently. Then came a weird whistling sound, like he was trying to catch his breath from laughing so hard. I pleaded with him to leave, but he just stayed there. Scared, I retreated from the window and went back to my bed, feeling too afraid to even think about calling the police. Suddenly, I heard a noise at the back door. He was trying to break in. My heart raced as I rushed from my room to the top of the stairs, listening intently. Then the front door started rattling too. He was trying to force it open. Thankfully, he gave up quickly. I hurried to close my window and draw the curtains, realizing how vulnerable I was. I was just a skinny, weak 14-year-old, not prepared to defend myself. I stayed locked in my room until my mom came home around 9. When I told her what happened, she was furious that I hadn't called 911. Looking back, I regretted not doing so. It was one of those moments in my youth that I would look back on, questioning my decisions. Once, when I was a teenager, I had my house all to myself for a whole week. This was unusual because my mom and dad usually didn't go out much. But this time, it was different. My mom had a friend named Patty who was quite wealthy. She invited my parents to go on a trip with her, and she was paying for everything. Since I'm an only child, there was no one else to stay with me. So, I had the house to myself. We lived in a town called Newark in Ohio. It's in a place with a funny name, Licking County. The house where I grew up had a forest right behind it. Our street was really quiet, not many cars passed by. There was a big wooden deck in our backyard, which looked out over the trees. We had a pretty big yard too, with a small pond for fish and an above-ground pool. I remember it was a Thursday night in July 2013, because I was talking to my friends about plans for the weekend. I was sitting out on the deck, listening to music and relaxing. That's when it all started. I thought I heard someone talking in the woods. I turned down my music to listen, but the sound didn't happen again. So I turned the music back up. Then, I heard it again, a voice coming from the trees. This time, I turned off the music and listened more carefully. I could definitely hear a man's voice saying, "Hey, over here." It sounded a bit far away, but not too much. The woods were about 20 to 30 yards from where I was sitting. At first, I didn't think they were calling to me. Maybe it was just some kids playing a game. But then, the voice called out again. "Hey, over here! We need help!" This voice sounded too grown up to be a kid's. Hearing someone yell for help is always a bit worrying. Now I was starting to feel uneasy, wondering if they were calling out to me. Next I heard, "Straight in front of you. Please come help us." The voice was coming from directly in front of me, in the woods. I started to think they were definitely talking to me. I asked hesitantly, "Who is that?" The reply came, "We just need help. We're stuck in the woods." I asked again, "What does that mean?" The voice answered, "Just please come help, straight in front of you." I stood up, walked down the steps from the deck to the grass, and started walking towards the woods. I called out, "I'm coming, where are you?" The voice answered right away, "Right in front of you." I responded, "I see you. Are you alone or with someone?" But this time there was no reply. I stopped walking halfway to the woods, feeling uneasy. Something didn't feel right about all this. I started moving backwards, heading back to my house and the deck. I was too nervous to turn my back to the woods. It took me a while to realize how strange this whole thing was. When I got back to the deck, the voice was silent. If they really saw me and needed help, they would have said something like, "Where are you going?" at least. It seemed like they knew I was suspicious. How many people were out there? Maybe just one, maybe more. It made no sense for someone to be stuck in the woods but still be able to see me. What happened? Did their shirt get caught on a branch or something? I went inside, locking all the doors. I sat in the living room, still feeling the effects of the weed. That's probably why I trusted the voice at first. Then I heard the voice again, but closer. Definitely in the backyard and not in the woods. I heard splashing sounds, maybe from the pool or the pond. I rushed to the window to check. At first I couldn't see anyone. Then I heard the voice say, "I see you," followed by a laugh. I spotted him. One guy at least. He was hiding behind the pool, and all I could see was his head and his dark, medium-length hair. It was too dark to see more. I quickly closed the blinds, hoping to ignore him. If I didn't react, maybe he would lose interest. He seemed like someone who got a kick out of scaring people, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. But then, there was a loud, aggressive banging on the window, and the guy was screaming for help. I yelled back, "Get lost, you freak! The cops are on their way!" I kept shouting, trying to sound more intimidating than him. I heard him start to laugh, but his laughter faded as he walked away. Shaking and out of breath, I sat back down on the couch. It seemed like the guy finally left. Despite everything, I managed to sleep well that night, thanks to the weed. I wondered if I would have reacted differently if I wasn't high. The whole thing made me more cautious about opening the door to strangers. On a typical Friday after school, which for me meant playing video games, eating pizza, and chatting with my buddies over the phone, I had just stepped off the school bus. The house was empty. Just me. My parents were still at their jobs. My mom often gets back after 5 p.m., and my dad around 6:30. My older brother, well, I had no clue where he was. He's grown up, so he could be anywhere, really. As soon as I reached home, I dived onto my bed and changed into comfortable clothes, like baggy sweatpants and a huge t-shirt that I'd never wear outside. For a kid like me, this was one of the best feelings. School's great and all, seeing my friends is fun, but there's something special about being at home after a whole week of school. Plus, I attended a Catholic school with a really strict dress code. That's why I couldn't wait to get out of my school clothes as soon as I got home. Besides, my mom would be upset if I lounged around the house in them. So I did what I always did. Took a shower, relaxed a bit, and munched on some snacks while waiting for my friends to log on for some video game action. My mom came home earlier than usual that day, mentioning that she and Dad were heading to a party a few hours away. Dad arrived shortly after Mom. I was pretty excited about them going to a party, meaning I'd have the house to myself the whole night. They left around 7 p.m., reminding me to stay safe, giving me a hug, and instructing me to call our neighbor in case of an emergency. Of course, I could call them too. But they wouldn't be much help from 2 hours away. We're tight with our neighbors, having known them since I was a baby, practically like family. I assured Mom everything would be fine and that they deserved a fun night out. They're always working hard and are amazing parents. A couple of hours after they left, I started feeling sleepy. My plan to stay up all night was crumbling. I was unusually tired and didn't bother resisting sleep. I lay in bed, texting friends, browsing social media, and watching YouTube, when suddenly I heard a car outside. Springing from bed, I thought it was my parents returning. I peeked through the blinds, rubbing my eyes to see clearer. I didn't know the car that had just pulled into our driveway at all. As soon as it entered, its headlights shone straight through my window, making me quickly move away. I was puzzled. Who could be visiting my house at this hour? I tried calling my mom, but there was no answer. For a moment, I thought maybe my parents had too much to drink and got someone else to drive them, but that seemed unlikely. They're not the type to drink much. I peeked out from behind the blinds, just enough to see outside without being seen. A few moments later, the car revved its engine, backed out, and sped away down our street. Our neighborhood is tiny, with just 3 streets and about 8 or 9 houses on mine. We're nearly at the end of our street, which is a dead end. I thought maybe the driver was just confused, maybe drunk or lost. But I was wrong. They knew exactly what they were doing, and were certainly not lost. About 20 minutes later, I saw the car head toward the dead end of our street, near the dark wooded area. I couldn't see much from my window, and there was no way I was going outside to check. I knew it wasn't uncommon for someone to pull into a driveway by mistake, maybe to turn around or sort something out. But I had a bad feeling about this. Our street doesn't get much traffic, especially late at night. Being alone, I felt uneasy. Then, as I was about to fall asleep, I heard someone yelling inside the house. It took me a moment to understand what was happening. I was startled and half asleep, but it was clear. Someone had broken into our house. I leapt out of bed, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it. I had to move quickly. I had nothing to defend myself with and nowhere to hide. Our house is small, so I knew it wouldn't take long for the intruder to find me. They could enter my room any second. Just then, my mom started calling back. My phone rang loudly. I didn't dare answer my phone, worried that the intruder might hear it. My only hope was that the noise hadn't already caught their attention. Desperate to escape, I rushed to my window, yanking the blinds open to try and open it. But frustratingly, it just wouldn't open. I'd never tried to open my window before. It was locked, and despite my frantic efforts, I couldn't unlock it. The lever refused to move. Realizing my situation was getting worse, I knew I needed to do something fast to avoid being found. In a rush, I pushed my dresser across the room, placing it in front of my door as a makeshift barricade, hoping it would be enough to stop him if he tried to get in. With no closet in my room, my only hiding spot was under my bed. It seemed too obvious, likely the first place someone would look, but I had no other choice. I could hear footsteps on the hardwood floor in the hallway, moving towards my room, followed by a loud, frightening knock. The force of it scared me so much that I had to cover my mouth to stop myself from screaming. Then, the sound of the door handle jiggling, him trying to get in, but luckily failing. He started talking through the door, saying, "Hey, I know you're in there. How about you just let me in and make this easier for both of us?" Under my bed, I managed to quietly dial the police. Luckily, an officer was only a mile or 2 away and arrived within minutes, but those minutes felt like an eternity. The man kept yelling, demanding I open the door. Soon, one of the officers entered the house, followed closely by 3 more, each arriving minutes apart. The first officer announced his presence loudly. The intruder had left the front door wide open, allowing the officer easy entry. It wasn't long before the cop found the man at my bedroom door and ordered him to the ground. But the man attacked the officer, leaving the cop no choice but to shoot him. He was rushed to the hospital, and I gave my statement to the police. I immediately called my mom, and my parents hurried back home. The man survived the gunshot and was now in jail, awaiting trial. My mom ensured we had the best lawyer to take him to court. Now, I really don't like being home alone. After that night, it's easy to understand why. A few years back, something scary happened. Both my mom and dad were away for work in another town. My brothers and sisters had to go to their school, leaving me by myself at home. I spent my time playing games on our family computer in the living room. My mom and dad always said no to having gadgets in my bedroom. They believed I could be on my own, following rules like not answering the phone or opening the door if someone knocked or rang the bell. While deep into my game, I suddenly heard our front door open. This puzzled me because my mom and dad were not supposed to come back anytime soon. I went to check and found the door wide open, but nobody was there. I called out for my mom and dad but got no reply. Then I messaged them, and they both said they were still at their jobs. This made me feel uneasy, but I figured maybe they forgot to lock the door and the wind blew it open. So I decided to return to my game. But then, a noise from my bedroom made me stop. Feeling scared but curious, I went to find out what was making the noise. I first looked into the bathroom. Right after, I heard the sound of a zipper being opened and closed. I didn't have a wardrobe because we had to throw it out recently due to mold. Peering into my bedroom, everything looked normal. I moved closer to where I kept my clothes temporarily and opened it slightly. The moment I did, my heart raced. Inside, a man with a knife was hiding. I dashed to the living room, slammed my bedroom door shut, grabbed the landline, and ran outside with the keys to lock the intruder inside. I called the cops, and they came quickly. They searched the house and found the man trying to find me. He couldn't escape and was arrested. I often have bad dreams about this day. What if I hadn't noticed and just went to bed? Could I have been hurt? The thought scares me even now. When I was 9 years old, I was alone at home. It was the morning, and I had just finished taking a shower and brushing my teeth. I wore my most liked clothes, prepared a small corner in the living room with a drink and some food, and then turned on the TV to find something to watch. Suddenly the phone rang. I walked through the house to answer it. The voice I heard was very familiar and made me feel safe. He asked how my day was going and talked about small things. After a little bit, he said, "I like what you're wearing. Do you like the color blue a lot?" I answered, "Thanks, but no, it's not my favorite." "What are you planning to watch on TV?" he asked. It took me a few moments to realize what was happening. I was only 9 and didn't understand much. Then the voice on the phone became scary. It turned deep, rough, and frightening. He started to tell me all these scary things he wanted to do to me, with lots of details. I felt frozen. My skin felt hot and my heart was beating fast. I'd never been so scared in my life. I hung up the phone quickly and then called my mom at her job. I tried to tell her what happened, but my words were all mixed up. She scolded me for picking up the phone and told me to just keep watching TV. I tried to tell her that he knew what I was doing and what I was wearing. I also said I wanted to call the police for help. "That's not needed. I won't come home now. Just don't pick up the phone again and watch your TV," she said, and then we hung up. I felt really confused and very afraid. I felt like he was still watching me. I closed all the curtains and ran around the house, unsure if I should follow my gut or listen to my mom. All this time, the phone kept ringing. As soon as it stopped, it would start again. Every time the phone rang, it felt like electricity shooting through me. I was stuck, unable to move or think properly. During a brief silence between rings, I gathered all my courage and dialed 911. "I'm alone and I'm 9. Someone is watching me and saying they will hurt me," I managed to tell the operator. She was kind, trying to calm me down while promising to send help. As I listened to her reassuring words, my imagination ran wild with every horror scene I had ever seen. Was the person sneaking up on me? Could he attack me from outside? I was terrified of every possibility. I felt so scared that I couldn't even feel my own body anymore. In a sudden panic, I triggered the house alarm and ran outside. Once outside, the terror inside me mixed with a strange relief. My house, once a place of safety, now seemed small, dark, and full of danger. But outside, the world felt larger, brighter, and somehow safer. I could hear the normal sounds of life, like lawnmowers and birds, a stark contrast to the fear the phone had instilled in me. Watching a neighbor with his child, I felt a bit protected. The sound of police sirens grew louder, finally reaching me. It felt like forever before they arrived. One officer came to me, asking what had happened. Trying to explain was hard. The words the caller had used were either too scary or too embarrassing to repeat out loud. Even now, I remember how hard it was to speak those words. He was watching me. He said he was going to hurt me, I repeated in my young voice. Then, my mom arrived. She had decided to come back after all. But she didn't look for me or talk to me first. She just walked over to the police calmly, as if nothing was wrong. I watched everything from the doorway, caught between the safety of the outside and the darkness of my home. I watched my mom talking to the police officer, trying to make sense of the situation. Then I saw something that confused me even more. My mom was laughing. There I was, my face wet with tears, heart pounding, feeling terrified. And she was laughing. I couldn't understand why. I moved closer quietly to hear better. I'm really sorry about this. It seems she just got scared of being alone and made too much of it. My apologies, my mom said. I felt lost. Did I do something wrong? Was all of this just my imagination? Should I have not called for help? Did I really overreact? What happened next is a bit blurry to me. I remember I didn't want to be alone anymore, and the mere sound of the phone ringing sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't bring myself to talk about what the voice on the phone had said to me. My mom decided she knew who was behind the call, without knowing all of what happened. There was no investigation, no questions asked. She insisted it was a boy my age from across the street. I knew that couldn't be true, but my objections were ignored. Years later, when I was grown up with kids of my own, something happened during Christmas. My mom was in the living room, and I went to another room to change a diaper. Coming back, I heard my mom laughing as if she was telling a funny story. But the expressions on everyone else's faces were different. They looked uncomfortable, shocked, scared. Yet, she kept laughing. One of my older kids stopped me from going back into the living room, telling me my mom had just shared the story of when I was home alone and got threatened. She made it sound like a joke, like it was a funny childhood memory. To this day, I still don't know who made that call. I struggle with a fear of ringing phones and making phone calls every day. I was 17 and had just come back from my job at the golf course, where I worked for the summer. During the day, my friend and I planned to meet up later, so around 5 in the afternoon, I drove to his place. I'm from a small town, and it was still bright outside because it was the middle of summer. My friend lived in a large old house out in the countryside. On my way there, he called me to say he was out picking something up and would be back after I arrived. He mentioned the door was unlocked, so I could just walk in. This was pretty normal for us. When I got there, I parked and went inside to grab a cold drink from the fridge. Then I headed upstairs to the large room with sofas and a TV. I started flipping through the channels, and after a bit, I needed to use the restroom. The bathroom was at the end of the hallway, right above the staircase. I picked up an old comic book from a pile and settled in. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps downstairs. Thinking it was my friend, I yelled out a joke about what I was doing, expecting a funny response. Silence. I called out again, saying I was in the bathroom. Still, no answer. I figured maybe he couldn't hear me. Maybe he was wearing headphones. But then, the footsteps started coming up the stairs, and they sounded too heavy to be my friends. A chill ran down my spine. Something didn't feel right. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, right outside the bathroom door. "Hey, cut it out! This isn't funny!" I shouted. No reply. I didn't know what to think. I was hoping it was just my friend trying to scare me. So I stayed quiet, waiting to see what would happen next. Then the footsteps began to move away from the bathroom, down the hallway. I quickly finished up, opened the door, and ran downstairs, rushing out to the front yard. My car was the only one there. It was clear now. My friend hadn't been playing a trick on me. I was all alone. I took out my phone to call him, but there was no answer. The sun was going down, and although there was still some light, the whole situation made me feel uneasy. Just as I was trying to decide what to do next, my friend's car turned into the driveway. He saw my face and knew something was wrong. I explained everything to him. Since I had just come out, if there was someone inside, they hadn't had the chance to leave yet. Despite knowing better, we decided to act tough. We went to the shed, grabbed a baseball bat and a golf club, and prepared to search the house. We moved slowly upstairs, anticipating an intruder at every turn, but everything was eerily silent. We made our way down the hallway, following the path I heard the footsteps take. It led us to a large room at the end, a dead end with no other way out. But the room was empty. No signs of anyone being there. The carpet was undisturbed, furniture untouched, everything as it should be. We checked under beds, inside closets, everywhere, but found nothing. We searched the rest of the house, but found no one. My friend started to think I was just seeing things, suggesting I imagined the whole incident. But even 15 years later, I can't shake the certainty of what I experienced. Someone, or something, was in that house with me. Someone stood outside the bathroom door, knowing I was inside. Whoever or whatever it was, I'm just thankful they chose to leave me be. I've lived in the countryside all my life, from farms in Tennessee to the isolated places in Florida. I've seen it all. We grew up without things most people find normal today. No internet, no TV, and no cell phones. Sounds scary, doesn't it? I consider ourselves part of the last group of kids before the internet took over. Sure, dial-up was a thing, but hardly any of us could use it. But to be honest, it wasn't all bad. Except for the hot summer days when we felt like we were melting while working outside. Living in an old place in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee was full of surprises. I want to share one of those stories with you, hoping you might like it. It all began on a usual Friday night. My brothers and I were alone at home. Since we didn't have much to do, we decided to play hide and seek inside and around the house. We usually didn't go outside because it was completely dark. To give you a better picture, our house was on top of a big hill with a long, curvy driveway going down. That night, we divided ourselves into seekers and hiders. The game started, and everything seemed normal at first. But as time went on, we noticed strange noises coming from outside. It wasn't like any animal sound we were familiar with. It was more like whispers carried by the wind. Curiosity got the better of us, and despite our initial decision, we ventured outside with flashlights in hand. The night was unusually cold, and the only light came from our flashlights and the few stars peeking through the clouds. As we moved closer to the source of the noises, we felt an eerie feeling creeping up our spines. It was as if the air around us became heavier, making it hard to breathe. We reached the edge of the forest that bordered our property. The whispers seemed louder here, almost like they were calling out to us. We stood there, not moving, trying to make sense of what we were hearing. Suddenly, a cold wind blew past us, and the whispers stopped. It was silent, too silent. We looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. That's when we saw it. A faint light moving between the trees, too erratic to be someone with a flashlight. We couldn't decide if we should go back or follow the light. Our curiosity was strong, but so was our fear. As we debated, the light vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving us in the dark, with the unsettling feeling that we were not alone. That night, we barely slept, listening to every sound, wondering if what we saw was real or just our imaginations. The next morning, we talked about going into the forest in daylight to investigate, but we couldn't shake off the dread from the night before. This was just the beginning of our encounter with the unknown, a series of events that would continue to haunt us for days to come. Our house had 3 levels, a basement, the main floor where we all lived, and an upstairs that was just my room. There was also a deck at the back, high up, maybe 10 or 12 feet off the ground. But let's get back to what happened. It was very dark outside, and nobody really liked going beyond the porch at night. Playing hide and seek was starting to get boring because we didn't have much space inside. So I thought it would be exciting to hide outside, even on the roof. That decision turned into one of my biggest mistakes. At first, it was okay. The weather was getting cooler because it was almost fall. The air felt nice and cool, which was calming. But after a bit, something didn't feel right. I was enjoying the night sounds, like crickets and cicadas, but suddenly, all the sounds stopped. This was strange to me, but I was too young to understand it was a bad sign. I sat very still, trying to hear anything beyond the wind. Then suddenly, there was a loud noise on the other side of the roof. Our roof was made of metal, so you could hear clearly if something was on it. It sounded like something had landed far away from me. I looked, but saw nothing. This scared me, but I thought maybe my brothers were trying to scare me. I called out to them from my window. They came running, annoyed, saying the roof was off limits. I asked my older brother if he was making the noise to scare me. He said no and suggested we check it out. So we went to the middle of the roof and listened. It got very quiet again, which made me even more nervous. Then we heard a banging noise from the other end of the roof. It sounded like something with hooves was charging at us, but we couldn't see anything. The roof was empty, except for us. This thing seemed to run around us, but I couldn't touch or see it, even though I could feel the vibration of its steps. It ran in circles for a short time, then suddenly stopped and seemed to jump off the roof and vanish. We rushed back inside, locking everything, and stayed close together, completely terrified. When I was 13, something scary happened. I lived in a side-by-side house with my dad and older brother. We had 2 bedrooms. My dad and I shared one, and my brother had the other to himself. It was normal for them to be out at night, leaving me alone to play video games. One night, just like any other, my dad was probably at a bar, and my brother was out somewhere too. I was playing the first Resident Evil game on my PlayStation, and by midnight, I felt really sleepy, so I decided to go to bed. I always slept with my bedroom door open. Never, in all our time living there, did my dad or brother come home through the back glass door. Sometimes my brother would forget his keys and knock on my bedroom window to get in, but my dad always used his keys to come in through the front door. But this night was different. I heard the back door slide open. It was a loud and difficult door to open, so the sound was unmistakable. Lying in bed, I was wide awake, scared by my own thoughts. I heard footsteps moving from the dining room to the kitchen, then to the living room. Whoever it was didn't seem to care about making noise. After a quiet moment, I saw someone walk past my bedroom door. I was terrified, my heart pounding. Then, this person went into the bathroom right next to my room and turned on the light. The bathroom light filled my room, and I was lying there, completely scared, the light making me feel even more exposed. You might be thinking, why didn't I call out for my dad or my brother? Like I said before, I was sure it wasn't them. It couldn't be a family member or a friend either. I felt it was someone who shouldn't be there. After leaving the bathroom light on, this person went into my brother's room and started making a lot of noise, like they were looking for something. I was just lying there, too scared to move. Then they walked past my room again. I was waiting, scared, thinking they might come into my room next. But they didn't. Instead, I heard them moving around in the living room, making noises as if they were frustrated or looking for something. They kept walking back and forth, passing by my room, going into the bathroom, then back again, several times. It felt like they were playing a game with me, knowing I was there, hiding in fear. The noises continued, and from the large shadow that moved past my door, I could tell it was a man. He went through every room but mine. Then, suddenly, I heard him walk back to the sliding door, open it, and leave. I stayed in bed, too scared to move, trying to understand what had just happened. Eventually, I fell asleep from being so tired. In the morning, both my dad and brother were back. I've asked them many times, but they both swear it wasn't them. Why would they use the back door and then leave the same way? This happened 21 years ago. I still don't know who it was or why they came. Nothing was taken. But what really puzzles me to this day is why they never entered my room. The door was wide open, and they passed by many times. It just doesn't make sense at all. Back when I was around 21, I lived on my own. It was a peaceful night, so I left my window open without a second thought. My apartment was on the first floor, but the window had a screen that wasn't easy to remove. I thought my neighborhood was safe enough not to worry about such things. That night, something terrifying happened. I woke up smelling smoke. In the darkness, I reached out to turn on my lamp, but instead my hand touched something warm and alive. A person. My heart raced as I realized there was a man without a shirt in my room, smoking and looking right at me. I screamed at him to leave, which must have scared him as much as he scared me, because he jumped out of the window and ran away. After he left, I quickly closed the window and pushed my bookshelf in front of it to block it. The next morning, I saw the window screen lying on the ground outside. I couldn't go back to sleep that night, and ever since, I've never left my window open more than a crack. I also made a promise to myself never to live on the first floor again. I still don't know if he came to steal from me or what his intentions were, but the fear I felt was real. It makes me shiver to think if this had happened before without me noticing. It was truly a night of horror. I'm now 16 and live in a half house with my family. This includes my 3 little brothers, all younger than 5, my older sister who's 18, and our parents. Around 3 years back, when we were in a different flat, I found myself alone for a whole day. This was common since my dad worked during the summer. My mom would take the kids out for activities like going to the pool. I'd usually sleep late and had a few house chores to complete before they all returned. One task was to do the laundry. In our building, each floor had about 20 homes, and we all shared one laundry room. My home was a short walk from it, and on the way, I had to pass by the stairwell door, which had a small window in it. I was moving clothes from the washer to the dryer when I heard a strange clicking sound. I wasn't sure what it was, but I stopped to listen. Then it stopped. That flat always gave me the creeps, and this sound was not making things better. I quickly finished with the laundry and started it drying. Then, as I was heading back, the clicking started again. I stopped dead in my tracks. The noise seemed to come from the stairs. Scared as I was, I peeked through the stairwell door's window but saw nothing. Feeling a bit better, I hurried back to my flat. Once inside, I locked the door and tried to go back to my day. But in that flat, when it was quiet, you could hear everything clearly. People talking, footsteps, laughter, all of it, especially from the hallway. And that's where I heard something unsettling. I was in the kitchen feeding my pets when I caught the sound of slow, heavy steps in the hallway, coming closer to our door. I ran to the living room and turned off the TV's sound to listen better. Suddenly, there were 3 loud knocks on our door. I was really scared, not sure what to do next. I kept the TV off and crept towards the door to peek through the spy hole. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was a dark shape standing there, its back to me just outside our door. I was stuck, not knowing what to do next. Then, that weird clicking noise came again, the same one from before. In panic, I grabbed my pets and hid in my bedroom. I was truly frightened, yet part of me started to doubt, thinking maybe it was all in my head. I often listened to scary stories, and perhaps I was just scaring myself for no reason. But later that day, when my sister got back, I decided to tell her what happened. She loves all things ghostly and strange. As I shared my story, her face turned pale. She whispered she had seen a similar shadowy figure, but always in dark places, never in the light. Another night, I was in my bed, the lower one of our bunk beds, and my sister slept above. It was 3:37 in the morning, the fan was on, and our nightlight was lit. My sister was deep in sleep. Again, the soft clicking sounded, this time coming from under my bed. My cat, resting with me, didn't react, making me think I was just imagining things. But then, I saw a thin, dark, and cold hand reaching out from under the bed, slowly moving towards me. I screamed, loud enough to wake my sister, but not loud enough to disturb anyone else. Sleepily, she told me to be quiet, wanting to go back to sleep. "But look at this," I urged, but when I looked again, the shadow was gone. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, scared to close my eyes. That apartment was full of scary moments, most of them involving that shadow. Thankfully, nothing strange has happened since we moved out. I'm just relieved that whatever it was didn't follow us to our new home. I'm so grateful for that. One evening, my younger sister and I were watching a scary movie at our house when we suddenly heard the sound of a key turning in our front door, followed by the door opening. We were sitting in the living area, right next to a big glass door, which was not far from the main entrance, so the sound was very clear to both of us. At first, we weren't scared because we remembered that our father had gone out to buy some stuff, so we just thought maybe he came back. "Dad, did you come back so soon?" I asked in a normal tone, but there was no answer. Dad, are you there?" I tried again, thinking maybe he didn't hear me before. Still, there was only silence. This is when I began to feel that something was off, and by looking at my sister's face, I could tell she was feeling anxious too. We exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to do next, when suddenly we heard some noises coming from just outside the glass door. I was so scared I couldn't move. I called out again, my voice shaky this time. "Dad, is it you?" But again, there was no reply. Now I was truly terrified. I jumped up from the couch. My sister quickly stood up too, and began to walk fast to the other side of the room towards the kitchen. She later told me she wanted to grab a knife because she was so scared. She had a look of pure terror on her face, a look I had never seen before. We both stood there, not making a sound, looking at each other with fear. I didn't know what to do next, and didn't want to make any noise. I decided to go towards the glass door and started to slide it open very slowly, looking into the dark outside. When I opened the door enough, I stuck my head out to look around the area, bracing myself for anything scary. But to my shock, there was nobody there. What was even stranger was that the main entrance was still locked tight. My sister and I felt a huge relief, thinking there might have been someone trying to get into our house. I went straight to ask my mother if she had come in or heard anything unusual. She also thought that Dad had come home because she heard the front door opening too. About a half hour later, which seemed like forever since we were still very scared, our dad finally got home. He told us he hadn't come back earlier. To this day, my sister and I still can't explain what happened that night, and it seems we'll never find out. I am now 27 years old. But this scary thing happened back when I was 13. My little sister was 9, and my youngest brother was just 6. We all lived with our mom, who was raising us by herself. She often had to work late at night, especially on weekends. By that age, I was already able to look after things at home, so whenever Mom had to work, it was up to me to take care of my brother and sister. This particular story took place on a Saturday night. Let me paint a picture of what our house looked like back then. Entering the house would put you directly into the living room. There was a hallway in front of you. To your right, you'd find the kitchen. Straight ahead was a bathroom on the ground floor. To your left, there were stairs going up. At the top of the stairs, directly in front of you, was the bathroom on the first floor. The first door to the right was my bedroom, and next to it was my brother's room. Directly opposite my room was where my mom slept, and right beside her room was where my sister slept. Now let me dive into what happened that night. Before Mom headed out to her job, she handed me $20 to buy pizza for dinner, and then she left. I ordered the pizza, and we enjoyed eating it together, having a fun night. But about 2 hours after we finished eating, my sister needed to use the bathroom on the ground floor. However, when she came back from the bathroom, she looked worried. She told me that while she was in there, she heard a knocking sound on the window. I tried to calm her down, telling her it was probably nothing serious. But then, about an hour after that, we all heard a distinct knocking sound, but this time it was at the front door. Peeking through the door's eye hole, I saw a man outside. He looked very dirty, with long, untidy brown hair. It was hard to tell, but he might have been without a home. When I looked more closely, my heart skipped a beat. In his hand, he was holding a knife. I quickly turned to my brother, telling him to switch off the TV and all the lights. "Hurry," I whispered. I then asked my sister to grab my old flip phone while I dashed into the kitchen to get a knife for myself. Upstairs now, I urged my siblings, my voice low but firm. I instructed my brother to hide under his bed and told my sister to find a hiding spot in our mom's closet. I decided to hide in the bathtub upstairs, pulling the curtain closed behind me. Not long after, the sound of our front door being forced open echoed through the house. Our door wasn't the strongest, so it wasn't a shock that it gave in easily. I could hear the sound of doors being opened one by one downstairs. With shaking hands, I dialed 911 on the flip phone, trying to keep as quiet as possible. Then the footsteps grew louder, coming upstairs. My heart raced as I heard the bathroom door creak open. I covered my mouth with one hand to stop any noise, the phone tightly gripped in the other. Miraculously, the man didn't pull the shower curtain aside. After he left, my worry for my brother and sister surged. Ignoring my fear, I slid out from the bathtub and sneaked out of the bathroom. Spotting the man, I didn't think twice. I charged at him, using the knife. Right in the midst of the chaos, the police arrived. The man tried to escape, but the police caught him just as he reached the front door. I quickly checked on my siblings, finding them safe. The police then called our mom. She came rushing back and decided to quit her job right after that night. That night remains the most terrifying experience I've ever had when I was alone with my siblings. I hope nothing like it ever happens again. I was 11 years old back then, a young girl living in a small town in Ohio. It was a cold day in December, and the ground was covered with a light layer of snow. My whole family had gone to the nearest supermarket to buy groceries, leaving me alone at home. I didn't go with them because I was sick with a high fever. Besides, I never liked going out much. Crowds made me nervous, and I was always scared that people would judge me. So, there I was, alone in my room with only my loyal dog Max for company. This detail is crucial for what happened next. I was trying to pass the time by watching videos on my laptop when something strange caught my eye. I thought I saw a shadow move past my window. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking my fever was making me see things. But deep down, I had a bad feeling about it. I tried to focus back on my laptop, but then Max jumped off the bed and started growling at the window. At first, I didn't think much of it. Max often growled at animals that wandered near the window. But then, I remembered the shadow I saw. Suddenly, I felt a chill run down my spine. I walked over to the window, hesitating. At first glance, everything seemed normal. But then, my heart dropped. There were footprints in the snow, leading right up to my window. I was frozen with fear. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. Slowly, I looked down and saw a man hiding right below my window. He was tall, with dark hair, a beard, and he was wearing a snowsuit. Our eyes met, and time seemed to stop. Those few seconds felt like an eternity. Panicking, I grabbed my phone and ran to the bathroom upstairs. I could hear Max barking furiously, but I was too scared to think straight. Instead of calling the police, I called my mom. I know it wasn't the smartest choice, but I just needed to hear her voice. She could tell something was terribly wrong. As soon as I told her what was happening, she said she would call the police and come home right away. For a moment, I felt a bit better, knowing help was on the way. But then, I heard the sound of breaking glass. My whole body started shaking, and I couldn't think clearly. Then the worst part happened. There were screams, loud and terrifying screams, filling the air. And that's when I understood the horror of the situation. Max was fighting the man. I was still terrified, yet there was a tiny bit of relief in me. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the front door being forced open. It was my mom and the police rushing into the house. My mom hurried upstairs to the bathroom, and when I opened the door for her, I felt a wave of safety wash over me. Holding me in her arms, I felt safer than I ever had before. She led me downstairs, and that's when I saw the man being led outside by the police. He was in handcuffs, crying, and there was blood on him. Then Max ran to me so happy, licking my face and jumping around as if he knew he had done something great. Max, whom I call Metallic now, is still with me. She's 8, but still has the energy of a young puppy. I will always love Metallic. She's more than just a pet, she's my hero. Without her, I might not have been here to tell this story. I'm really into horror stuff. I'm 20, and for the last year, I've been gathering everything from figures to masks, even life-size ones. This story I'm about to tell you isn't the scariest, but it had a big impact on me. I'll keep it simple. I love everything about horror, especially Michael Myers. And last October, I got a life-size statue of him, along with a Chucky doll that looks just like the real thing. Some might think I'm nuts, but I can't get enough of horror. Right now, I'm keeping everything stored except for the Michael statue, which is as tall as a person, standing at 6 feet. He looks incredibly real, with a mask, blood-stained clothes, and even a knife. He's in my room, right next to my bed. It was scary at first to have something that looks like a person in the dark corner of my room, but I got used to it. He made me feel safe, oddly enough. I didn't move him because my family didn't like him much, but that's not the main part of the story. Last year, after I got the statue, I was alone at home watching movies when I heard a loud noise from upstairs. I was scared and didn't know what to think. I walked up to my room slowly, and then I heard noises coming from the front door downstairs. I was confused and scared because I was home alone. I sat in the dark, too afraid to turn on the lights, and listened. I heard voices, like men talking, and realized someone had entered because I forgot to lock the door. The TV was still on, so they must have known someone was home. There I was, sitting in the dark, staring at the Michael Myers statue, hearing footsteps coming closer to my room. I was hiding in the corner, heart racing. My heart was racing and I could barely breathe. The room felt hotter and my back was pressed against the cold wall. Then the door creaked open and a shadowy figure with a hood stepped inside, heading straight towards me. He was holding something in his hand, something small and sharp, maybe a pocket knife. I was trying to find something, anything to defend myself with, when suddenly, something unbelievable happened. Michael's arm moved. Remember, it was dark, so the intruder didn't realize Michael was there until he heard the arm move. It wasn't a sound of machinery. It was the sound of his arm's material rubbing against itself. The man turned around, screamed out loud, and ran faster than I've ever seen anyone run before. He started shouting, "Go, let's get out of here!" to someone else who was waiting in a van outside. I got up and watched them speed away. Then I noticed a crack in my window. Those troublemakers must have been throwing rocks at my window, maybe trying to distract me, but I wasn't focused on that. I turned back to Michael, completely shocked. I had no idea he could move. I examined him and found out he was an animatronic. It seemed like he moved just at the right moment, and it felt like he saved my life that night. It's almost funny now thinking about how scared that intruder was. I fixed the window and told the police about the break-in. They said there wasn't much they could do, but they took a report in case the intruders tried to break into another house. Thankfully, they didn't take anything since there wasn't much of value downstairs. That Michael Myers statue, which usually looks so real and scares anyone who sees it in the dark, played a hero that night. It sounds crazy, maybe even laughable, but this really happened. I'm incredibly grateful to have that statue in my room. I never imagined it could save my life, especially since it never moved on its own before. How did it move that night? Was it just a coincidence? I might never find out, but I'm so thankful to Michael. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't been there? I am a 27-year-old woman living alone with my dog. I bought my house in the winter of 2020, so I'm still quite new around here. Next door, there's a kind elderly man named Bob. We get along really well. One day, as we were talking, Bob started telling me stories about the people living nearby. He's lived here the longest, so he knows a lot about everyone. When the topic shifted to the guy living on my other side, who we'll call Jack, Bob suddenly seemed uneasy. Bob whispered, "Did you hear that Jack got mixed up in that awful killing of the library worker?" I was confused and asked him to explain. It seemed like Bob either regretted mentioning it, or maybe he just didn't hear me. Either way, he quickly changed the subject, and I didn't push for more details. Thinking back on what little I knew about Jack, he's a tall man with hair that's starting to gray and keeps to himself. When I moved in, I was a bit worried because his house always seemed dark, with every window covered and his old car hardly ever moved. He's also the only one in our neighborhood who has a tall fence around his backyard. These things seemed odd to me now. That night, curiosity got the better of me, and I started looking up what Bob had mentioned, finding a news story without much trouble. The headline was about one of the most shocking murders in our area. I pored over news stories and court records about the violent death of a woman in her 40s. Apparently, when Jack was younger and lived in the next area over, he and a buddy tried to steal from a woman's house in broad daylight, but she caught them. Instead of running away, Jack's friend hit her hard, knocking her out. According to what the friend said later while he was busy stealing, he saw Jack attacking the woman on the ground, even though she was knocked out. Then, Jack did something terrible with a baseball bat to her. The friend then did something horrifying. He cut her wrists and they both wrote on her bare skin with black ink. Afterward, they took her car, but got caught because they crashed it on a slippery road. When the woman's son returned from school, he couldn't even recognize his own mother. Jack's family tried to argue in court that he was not in his right mind, bringing up stories about how he acted out as a kid, even once threatening his own mom with a knife. But the court didn't accept the insanity defense. Still, Jack was let out of jail after only a short time, which I think is way too lenient for his part in such a cruel act. Jack's friend got out of jail in 2016. They didn't get harsher punishments because of a technicality about the robbery happening in the day. It's just wrong, and shows there are big problems with how justice is handled. Since learning about Jack's past, I've only run into him once. I was taking out the garbage when his dog, tied up outside, jumped at me, barking loudly. Jack came over, pulled the dog away, and said sorry. I usually like dogs, so I wasn't mad and told him it was okay. I wouldn't have argued anyway. I've been in jail before and talked to people accused of murder, so I'm not scared easily. I believe people can change and do well after getting help. But living next to someone who is killed is a different feeling. My friend Jack often brings girls home. It's usually not a problem because they're quiet and respectful. My girlfriend visits a lot too. I always wear earplugs to bed since I like sleeping in late, until 8 or 9 in the morning. These earplugs are really good so I don't hear anything once I'm asleep. One morning around 5 a.m., the doorbell starts ringing over and over, and I eventually wake up. Our front door is old and not very strong. It has a big window that you can't see clearly through, but you can see if someone is there and even talk through it. Nobody was there when I checked, so I made sure the door was locked. It wasn't, so I locked it and went back to bed. But the doorbell kept ringing. Jack sometimes comes home late, so I thought it might be him forgetting his keys, but he would usually just call me. I decided to check again, which was a bad idea. This time, someone was standing at the door. They had gotten through the building's main entrance. I asked who it was, and a woman's voice answered. She said she was here earlier and needed to get her purse and ID, which had her driver's license. It sounded suspicious to me. I told her to come back later, but she kept insisting. More whispering voices were behind her, making me think this was a robbery attempt. I should have called the cops. But when she mentioned Jack by name, asking for him, I paused. I told her he wasn't here, but she insisted I let her in. I even checked Jack's room, and it was empty. Now she threatened to call the cops, and in my half-awake state, I wondered if Jack actually had her purse. I shouldn't let her in, but she was pressing me hard. When I asked for her name, she shouted that it wasn't my business. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice threatening, "Open up or we'll break the door." They start to shake the door, trying to force their way in. I realize the danger I'm in. Rushing back to my room, I dial 911 and quickly think about escaping through the window using the tree next to it as a way out. But then, everything goes silent again. About 15 minutes later, the doorbell rings once more. Looking through the glass, I see a police officer in a blue uniform. I unlock the door and tell him everything that happened, still thinking these were robbers. The police ask if Jack is home and if they can check his room. I lead them in, and we find Jack in a shocking state. He was in his room all along, hiding. He knew the people outside but was too scared to face them, leaving me to handle the situation alone. Then, more police officers arrive, and they arrest Jack. The woman and her friend are outside, talking to other officers, but they're not being arrested. They had called the police too, around the same time I did. It didn't take long to piece together what was happening. The officers asked me questions, including if I knew anything about Jack and the woman. I share everything I know, which isn't much since I was asleep with earplugs in. I overhear the police mention something about a sexual assault case. A forensic team arrives and starts searching Jack's room, gathering evidence. By noon, they all leave, taking Jack with them. I've always been a light sleeper, which turned out to be a blessing, especially after what happened that night. It's something I'm really grateful for now. It was a chilly night in October. My family had gone on a trip, leaving me alone in the house, well, except for the dog, Max, who I was looking after. I went to bed around 11 p.m. that night. Then, at about 2 a.m., a loud banging noise woke me up from downstairs. I glanced at my alarm clock. It was 2:12 a.m. Rubbing my eyes, I got out of bed and slowly walked to my door. I thought I heard someone moving around downstairs. Cautiously, I opened my door a crack. Then I heard footsteps coming up the hall, right outside my room. I was so scared of being seen, I silently hoped they wouldn't notice me, and quietly closed my door again. The footsteps stopped, just outside my room, as if waiting. It felt like they were there for hours, but it was only a few minutes. Then, the footsteps moved away, down the stairs. I peeked out the door and tiptoed to the staircase but saw no one. Hearing the front door close, I rushed to the window near the stairs to check the driveway. But there was nobody there. Living close to a cemetery, I couldn't completely dismiss the idea of ghosts, but I had no clue what was happening. Taking deep breaths, I decided the best thing to do was make sure the front door was locked and try to go back to sleep. The next morning, I kept thinking about the noise that had woken me up. No windows were broken, so I couldn't figure out what had made that loud bang. It may seem strange, but I initially thought it might have been a ghost. I convinced myself a spirit had visited my house. It wasn't a comforting thought, but it felt safer than the alternative. But then, as I walked to the back door, my heart skipped a beat at what I found. There were muddy boot prints leading to the door, which I had forgotten to lock, and it had been tampered with, likely with a lockpick. So, this wasn't a ghostly visit after all. Someone had tried to break into my house. I'm just thankful I wasn't harmed. Back then, I was learning how to protect myself. I lived in a small house with my mom, dad, and my two brothers. My dad wasn't home because he was working late. That day, my younger cousin, who was around 8 or 9, came to visit. My brothers are 12 and 8 years old, and I'm 16. I was about to open the gate for my cousin when I noticed a man approaching. Something about him seemed off, especially the way he moved and the strange redness of his eyes. He started yelling at me to let him into our yard. I quickly told my cousin to get my mom while I tried to keep the man calm and outside, but he didn't listen. Instead, he climbed over the gate and ran towards our house. I don't understand why he didn't try to hurt me, but I chased after him. Somehow he got inside our home. As I followed him in, the atmosphere in the house felt different, heavier. My heart was pounding, not just from the run but from fear. I could hear my mom in the kitchen, unaware of what was happening. My brothers were in the living room, their attention fixed on the TV, oblivious to the danger that had just entered our home. The man moved with an unsettling speed, heading straight for the living room. I shouted for my brothers to go to their room and lock the door. They looked at me, confused at first, then scared. They did as I said, running to their room. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a baseball bat we kept by the door for protection. My hands were shaking, but I knew I had to protect my family. The man was now rummaging through our belongings, his back turned to me. His actions were erratic, like he was searching for something specific but didn't know what it was. My mom came out of the kitchen, asking what was going on. I signaled for her to stay back. The tension in the air was thick, a mix of fear and the unknown. I didn't know who this man was or what he wanted, but I knew we weren't safe. As I stepped closer, ready to confront him, the lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. It felt like a scene from a nightmare. Except it was all too real. The man turned around, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, everything stood still. I could see the madness in his eyes, a deep, unsettling chaos that chilled me to the bone. He took a step towards me, and I tightened my grip on the bat, ready to defend my family at any cost. But then, the story takes a turn, leading deeper into a night filled with terror and uncertainty. The confrontation was just the beginning of a horrifying ordeal that would test the limits of our courage and our will to survive. When my mom saw the stranger inside our house, she tried to make him leave, but he wouldn't move. Then she started yelling at me, thinking I had let him in. I quickly told her that wasn't true. The man had jumped over the gate by himself. After that, I rushed to make sure my brothers and little cousin were safe. I led them to my parents' bedroom, a place where I thought they'd be out of harm's way, while my mom was still arguing with the intruder. Next, I knew I had to do something more. Remembering my self-defense lessons, I grabbed a kitchen knife. With a lot of fear but also determination, I approached the man and cut him on his arm, not once, but twice. Surprisingly, he didn't seem to feel any pain. He barely reacted, which was really strange and scary. My mom then had an idea. She told me to let our dog out. We have a big pit bull, and she's not the friendliest. I was scared to do it, but I knew we needed help. When I opened the door for her, she immediately went after the man, biting him. Somehow, he managed to get away from her. Right after that, my mom called my dad to tell him what happened, and I took care of the dog, putting her back in her place. I then went to let my siblings and cousin out of the room. We decided not to call the police. In our area, calling them usually doesn't help much with situations like this. This event might not sound too scary when told, but living through it was terrifying. Now, I always carry a knife with me for protection. I suggest everyone have something to defend themselves with, just in case. I hope and pray nothing like this ever happens to anyone else. Please, stay safe out there. In 2021, I shared a home with 2 other girls. We were all in our early 20s, I guess. Our house was next to a big empty space that people could enter from the main street. The fence at the back of our house was not very tall, just up to the waist, and a big tree next to it hid part of the view into the empty space. One evening during the hot summer, after taking a shower, I was wearing just shorts and a loose shirt. Suddenly, I heard our dog in the yard barking like crazy. My roommate, who owned the dog, wasn't home. I rushed outside to see the dog showing his teeth and growling at the fence. He had chased small animals before, so I thought maybe he had seen one in the tree. I went to pull him away by his collar because something felt very wrong. He kept barking wildly. When I looked up, I saw a man's shape in the dark on the other side of the fence. He was about average height, but didn't say anything. I couldn't see his face. I got scared and yelled out, "Wow, I didn't notice you there." He didn't respond at all, just stood there wearing a hat and coat, looking at me. I used the dog to shield myself as I backed into the house and locked everything up. I closed all the windows and called my friend to come over. After that night, a few odd things happened over the next few weeks, like a window screen coming off, which might have been the wind or some electronic parts in the yard, probably left by kids. Then, one late evening after hanging out with friends, I came back around 10 p.m. We usually left the back door open so the dog could go in and out since he was pretty intimidating, and we thought he would keep people away. I went to the kitchen, right by the open back door, and heard the dog barking outside again. This wasn't unusual, so I decided to get a drink before bringing him in. But then I saw a shadow inside the house near the back door, moving into the kitchen. I froze, wondering what this man was doing inside, especially wearing a coat in such hot weather. Fear took over. I moved back against the kitchen counter, trying to put distance between us. Then I saw he had a knife in his hand, one from our own kitchen. The knife block was behind me, meaning he had already been inside our house before this moment. This wasn't about stealing, as he had already sneaked in without taking anything. We fought, and he cleverly pulled the rug, making me fall and hit my head on the counter. I lost consciousness for about 5 to 6 minutes, based on when the police were called. The last thing I remembered was the loud barking of the dog from behind him. The dog seemed too afraid to attack but tried to scare him off. When the police and detectives came, they couldn't do much. Since the door was left open, it wasn't considered a break-in. It was also hard to figure out what he might have touched. I think he wore gloves, but I can't be sure. I had cuts on my hands from trying to defend myself and some bruises. But in the end, nothing came of it. The police just advised me to move, hoping it wouldn't happen again. I'm not certain if the man at the fence was the same as the one in the house, but he definitely was a shadow lurking in the dark, watching us. We once had another roommate who, feeling stressed, asked me for a menthol cigarette. I told her I don't smoke. She thought it might be the other girl, but neither of us smoked. She had been finding cigarette butts by the front and side doors during her stay, and picked them up, thinking it was us, but never mentioned it since it only seemed to bother her. She would leave early for work, which is why we never noticed the butts. Now, let's talk about a different kind of threat that's not physical, but equally scary. Identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America, with a new victim every 14 seconds. Imagine not being able to access your email because the password was changed, or receiving alerts about unknown transactions from your bank, credit cards, or even crypto accounts. The mix of shock, panic, anxiety, and frustration is overwhelming. That's where Aura comes in, offering a combination of identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, a VPN for online anonymity, password management, and antivirus software. It checks the dark web for personal information leaks and notifies you quickly. With Aura, your online presence is safeguarded, and you're alerted to any suspicious activity concerning your finances faster than many other services. To guard against identity theft, consider trying Aura for free for 2 weeks. Check if your personal info has been exposed online. Use the link in the description and share your experience in the comments. It's early morning, around 7 a.m., and I find myself waiting in a McDonald's parking place, hoping for the sun to rise. I've been forced to leave my house because someone has been sneaking around it for the last few days, and it's gotten worse. I'm 25, a woman, living by myself in a nice apartment on the first floor. I have friendly people living nearby. Since I work at night, and because of the virus situation, I haven't had much work lately. Staying awake late is something I'm used to. 4 nights ago, while I was watching TV around 2:30 in the morning, my dog started making a low, angry sound at the window. She does this only if there's someone or something near my outside space. I thought maybe an animal was out there until I heard noises like someone trying to open my door. I froze and listened hard, not really believing what was happening. Feeling really nervous, I called my mom, and then carefully looked outside through the window covers. I saw that the gate to my outside space was wide open. I always make sure it's closed, and the wind isn't strong enough to open it. Still talking to my mom, I decided to show I wasn't afraid. I went out to close the gate, letting whoever was there know I saw them. As I stepped outside, I saw a man walking away from where my gate was. He stopped and turned to look at me when he heard my door. He just stood there, watching me. He was a strange-looking white man, wearing a hoodie with his hands hidden, and he didn't carry anything. It was odd because I thought he might just be trying to steal something from the patio. The way he turned to stare gave me a cold feeling. Why would a thief want to make sure I saw him and then stand there staring? I was really shocked. I started to go back inside. He turned away, but then, after a few steps, he turned back to stare again. I went back inside and stayed on the phone with my mom for a long time until I managed to fall asleep. I reported it to the police, but they just took a note. After that scary moment, I put a big flower pot by the gate so it would make noise if someone moved it. For a couple of nights, everything seemed okay until last. Around 1 a.m., I heard a loud noise again. I called my mom, trying to calm down, and checked my house to see if something had fallen. Thinking it was nothing, I hung up. Then I remembered the flower pot I had set up as an alarm. I looked out and saw my gate open again, and the flower pot was on the ground. He had returned. I called the police again, and this time they came and looked around the area. The police didn't catch him after that night. Jump to what happened tonight, and it's safe to say I'm really scared now. I found a good deal on security cameras that can detect movement. I bought the last 2 just before the store closed. After setting them up, I felt safer. Then at 1 a.m., while I'm preparing a bath and talking to my boyfriend, my phone alerts me about movement caught by the cameras. Thinking it's probably just a stray cat since I didn't hear my gate being tampered with, I check the footage. To my shock, I see a man sneaking from the side of my patio towards my door. His hoodie pulled over his head, hands hidden in his pockets. He avoided the gate because it made noise the last time. It was the same man. He tried to open my door. The fear I felt was overwhelming. He was back. I quickly wrapped myself in a long coat, ran to the lobby without shoes, and called the police. My boyfriend arrived before the police, armed with a baseball bat, searching the backyard for the intruder. Sadly, he didn't find him. Neither did the police. And now, here I am, sitting in a McDonald's parking lot at 7 a.m., too frightened to go back home. Everything about this situation feels wrong. Why did he stare at me that first night? Why keep coming back even after knowing I've seen him? What does he want? He climbed the fence this time, avoiding the noisy gate and the flower pot I set up as an alarm. The scariest part is how he doesn't seem to care about being caught or making noise. What's stopping him? What does he want? There's nothing worth stealing on my patio. He's never carried a bag or anything. Now I have footage of him trying to open my door, but I'm not sure how to share that video. I've decided to stay with a friend for the next few days and keep a close eye on the camera feeds. I work as a security guard, mainly responding to alarms at homes and businesses. Most of the time, it's just a small animal setting off the alarm, or a shop that forgot to turn off their alarm system before getting a delivery. But one night, I got called to a house because the alarm for the back door went off. It seemed like someone tried to open it. The house owner was away, but she got an alert on her phone and asked her mom to meet me there. We found the door locked. We thought maybe someone tried to open it, and that set off the alarm. Inside, a light was on. The mom told her daughter about it over the phone. The daughter wasn't sure if she left it on. Leaving a light on might make burglars think twice, but she just couldn't remember. It made me feel uneasy. The mom wanted to go inside to check, but she didn't have an extra key. The neighbor had one, but it was late, and she didn't want to wake them up. So, I did my paperwork and went back to my usual patrol. An hour later, the same house triggered the alarm again. I was the closest, so I went back. This time, the police and crime scene investigators were there, talking to the mom and the now-awake neighbor. They were looking at a video the daughter sent them. In the video, 4 men with masks and hoods came out of the bathroom just a minute after the mom and I had left. They had broken into the house, locked the door from the inside to look normal, and turned on the light. The mom said this wasn't the first time. 3 men had broken into her daughter's house a month earlier. They seemed to know exactly when the daughter would be away. They wanted to rob the place quietly, without any trouble. But they had guns, ready to use them if needed. The mom had been so close to going inside. If she had gotten the key from the neighbor, or if we had found another way in, we might have walked right into those burglars. My job doesn't provide me with any protective gear like bulletproof vests. From now on, if I ever get a call about someone inside a house, I'm staying out, no matter what. I was lucky this time because something stopped me from going in when I might have done so without thinking. This was that rare case where something was really wrong, and it turned out to be the worst situation I've ever encountered. This scary thing happened to me in 2020, and it still scares me a lot. I've kept this story to myself until now, but I feel it's time to tell it. I won't say exactly where this took place to keep safe. I'm scared that people connected to the bad guys might try to find me. So, this all happened in July, late in the afternoon. My sister and I were living in a little house with 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom, surrounded by a big piece of land. It was like a dream place for me. We had everything we could wish for. A big piece of land, a garage for 2 cars, a big storage building, and a beautiful view from our backyard. Let me tell you some important things about our house. It was shaped like a square, with the backyard on the southeast side of the house. The backyard was tucked into a corner of the house with walls on 2 sides. You couldn't see what was around the house without leaning over the side, and you could only look out to the east and southeast. The garage was close to the backyard, just a few steps away, and the driveway to the garage was in front of the house. This meant you couldn't see anyone approaching from the driveway if you were in the backyard. So, there I was, one evening. I was relaxing in the backyard, smoking, enjoying the peacefulness and the nice weather. Suddenly, the peace was broken. I heard my sister scream, followed by 4 loud sounds like gunshots. I quickly stood up and peeked around the corner of the house towards the window of my sister's room, which looked out to the backyard. Just in time, I saw 3 people in masks jumping out of the window. They were dressed in dark clothes, and they seemed pretty old, maybe around 40, but they had masks on, so I couldn't see their faces well. One of them saw me and stopped, as if he didn't expect me to be there. Then they all ran towards the front yard, around the other side of the house. I quickly threw away my smoke and rushed inside through the kitchen door. I moved quickly down the corridor to my sister's room. The door was not closed, so I went in. The moment I entered, I couldn't move. My heart stopped. I felt so cold. There, on the bed, was my sister. She was lying there, still, looking at the ceiling, not moving, and there was so much blood. What I did next might not have been the best idea, but I went to the living room, grabbed a gun, and opened the front door just in time to see a dark car speeding away from our house. I shot at the car 3 times. 1 bullet missed, 1 hit the car's tire, and another broke the rear window. I think one of the bullets hit one of the men because I heard someone in the car yelling. I know now it was dangerous because we have neighbors across the street and I could have hit their house, but I wasn't thinking clearly. After the car drove off, I rushed back inside, grabbed some towels to try to stop my sister's bleeding, and called for help. As I was trying to help her, I told the operator everything that happened, but deep down, I knew my sister was already gone. She had no heartbeat, and there were 3 bullet wounds in her. I couldn't believe it at that moment. Because our area is usually very safe, the police and ambulances arrived very fast, in about 15 minutes. I had to tell the police everything, trying so hard not to cry. The police couldn't believe it either. Nothing like this had ever happened here in over 40 years. I won't bore you with every small detail, but after 3 months, the police figured out what happened. They looked at my sister's phone and saw she had been getting scary messages. It turns out she had unknowingly made a gang member angry because she was friendly with his girlfriend. Even after she stopped talking to the girlfriend, the gang member still wanted to hurt my sister. The night before she was hurt, she got a message from someone she didn't know saying, "I'm coming for you." Somehow he found out where we lived and came with 2 others to do something terrible. It's shocking because we live far from the city, where the gang usually is. This man was so upset over his girlfriend that he and his friends drove a long way just to find my sister. It's hard to understand why he would go so far over this. Now, about those 3 men. The one I shot as they were leaving didn't survive the ride. Another one was caught by the police during a traffic stop the next day. He was still driving the same car, which the police were looking for. Since there weren't many cars like that old blue Chevy Caprice around, the police found it quickly. The man driving it was caught and faced serious charges. He was found guilty of a very bad crime and received the strictest punishment possible. The main person behind all of this trouble didn't last long either. He was killed in a fight in his own city just a week later. It's strange how fate works sometimes. It seems like they all ended up facing the consequences of their actions. At least that's what I think. I had to go to court for the man I shot. He had no family, and because of some legal reasons, I didn't go to prison. But I did have to pay a big fine for using my gun recklessly, especially since I could have hurt someone by accident. I also had to learn more about using guns safely, but that didn't bother me much. For a long time after everything happened, I just stayed at home, not wanting to do much or go anywhere. I couldn't even bring myself to open my sister's room again. I kept that door shut so I wouldn't have to see inside. Losing her hit me very hard, and I lost interest in almost everything. Eventually, I decided I had to leave that place. It was too painful to stay, and I didn't feel safe there anymore. My sister and I were very close, and losing her so suddenly and in such a terrible way was heartbreaking. I had loved that house and imagined living there forever with my sister. But after what happened, I just couldn't stay. I moved far away, about 8 hours by car, and I haven't been back to that house since. I doubt I ever will. I still own the house and the land, but I can't bring myself to return. Even though I've moved away, I can't forget what happened that evening. Things are a bit better now, and I'm not alone anymore, but what happened will always stay with me. This story began in the chilly month of October, adding a naturally eerie atmosphere to everything. My small apartment is tucked away in the quiet corner of the building complex. That evening, as darkness wrapped around the world outside, I found myself engrossed in a TV show, chatting away with a friend through an online call, seated at my kitchen table. It was during this peaceful moment that I noticed a peculiar shadow dancing across the blinds of my living room window. Initially, I thought little of it, attributing the shadow to some trick of the light, or perhaps my own imagination playing tricks on me given the dim lighting of my apartment. However, as minutes ticked by, the same mysterious shadow reappeared. It must be nothing, I reassured myself. But then, a startlingly loud cough shattered the silence of my apartment. I froze, my heart racing. "Wait a minute," I whispered under my breath. I was supposed to be alone. The sound was so clear, as if someone else was right there in the room with me. Driven by a sudden surge of adrenaline, I spun around to face the window, only to be greeted by that unchanging shadow. I shifted my position slightly, yet the shadow remained perfectly still, a stark contrast to my growing unease. Realization dawned on me, a cold sense of dread gripping my heart. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed a pair of scissors from the table, which I had been using earlier for a craft project. With a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I stood up, my every step fueled by a mix of fear and bravery, and charged across my living room towards the window. Flinging the blinds aside with a swift motion, I found myself yelling with all the fierceness I could muster, "I swear I'll cut you open if I have to." The face that met mine on the other side of the glass was that of an old, disheveled man, his appearance wild and unkempt, his eyes a reflection of madness. We locked eyes for what seemed like forever, but in reality, it was only a few heartbeats. This unexpected encounter marked the beginning of a night that would forever haunt my memories, a night where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. After the man vanished into the darkness, either towards my bedroom window or the side door of our building, I didn't wait to see which path he took. Panic gripping me, I dashed to the only place in my apartment that felt safe, the bathroom, a small room without a single window. There, in the pitch black, I crouched down, shaking uncontrollably as I dialed the police with trembling fingers. The officers arrived swiftly, their thorough search of the surroundings bringing a temporary calm to the chaos of the night. They listened to my account of the events, their faces stern and focused. When one of them later informed me that they hadn't found the man, suggesting he had either escaped or was expertly hiding, a sarcastic "great, he's hiding" slipped from my lips, a bitter echo of my fraying nerves. The building's security personnel offered their support, advising me to perhaps spend the night elsewhere for my safety. However, the ordeal was far from over. A week had barely passed when I found myself walking into the building alongside a friend who had come to stay for the weekend. At the entrance, an old man greeted me with a familiarity that sent chills down my spine. I managed a weak smile in response, urging my friend to move past him quickly, my mind racing with fear. Without hesitation, I contacted the building's security, reporting the old man's unsettling presence. It wasn't long before they called back with startling news. The old man was, in fact, a resident of the building, bearing a superficial resemblance to my unwelcome visitor. Yet after reviewing the security footage, they provided me with a detailed description of the actual intruder, a revelation that did little to ease my distress. This entire episode left me deeply shaken, to the point where I barricaded myself in the bathroom for hours on end, too terrified to venture near my bedroom. It took me days to muster the courage to block out my bedroom window with a blanket, seeking some semblance of security in the vulnerability of my own home. All I had wanted was a simple night in, to relax with some chicken nuggets and my TV show. But that wish had been cruelly snatched away, replaced by a lingering fear that haunted every shadow, every unexpected sound in my once peaceful apartment. This story might not be as wild as others you've heard, but I think it's important to share. So let's start. This happened in November of 2021. My mom had her cousin Anna over to play some card games. They played for hours. It was around 4 in the morning when Anna decided it was time to head home. Mom insisted on walking her to her car to make sure she was safe. As Anna was driving away, my mom noticed a creepy man walking past our house. He looked older, had no hair, and was dressed in all black. Mom didn't really worry about it too much, so she went back inside and double-checked that all the doors were locked. Later, Mom woke me up to say they had finished playing cards and she was going to bed. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I started using my phone, hoping to get tired again. Not long after, I heard loud banging noises from the backyard. I was puzzled because I knew my dad was asleep, and he wouldn't be out there. I didn't bother to look outside, which is something I still regret. But my mom? She found it odd too, and decided to peek through the kitchen window. The moment she looked out, she saw a scary man trying to pry open our shed with a crowbar. When my mom saw him through the window, she realized it was the same scary man she had seen earlier near our house. She started yelling at him loudly, telling him to leave our place right away. She sounded very strong and angry. Her shouting woke up everyone in the house. My dad quickly grabbed his gun, and my mom and I took whatever we could use to defend ourselves. We all got into my dad's car and drove around our neighborhood trying to find the man. But he was nowhere to be seen, so we returned home, trying to understand what had just happened. It was a shock to all of us since nothing like this had ever happened before. But that's not where the story ends. The following weekend, at 4 in the morning, my parents were on their way back from a short trip. Suddenly, my mom saw the same man again. He was in a field, taking pictures of himself. He was bold enough to show his face around the place he tried to steal from. My mom told my dad to slow down the car so she could make sure it was him. Once she was sure, my dad got out of the car to talk to the man. The man looked surprised and quickly said it wasn't him, then started to run away. But that didn't stop my dad. He chased the man and managed to catch up to him, giving him a strong punch. My mom was so angry she thought about hitting the man with the car, but luckily my dad stopped her. My dad warned the man sternly, telling him never to come near our house again or he would be in serious trouble. After that, my dad talked to our neighbors, warning them about the thief. They said their sheds had been broken into as well, and they were missing things. I'm relieved that the man didn't manage to steal anything from us. I want to end this story with a piece of advice. If you ever hear strange noises inside or outside your home, always check it out. You never know what might be happening. Thanks for listening to my story, and please, always stay safe.